Chapter 307. What, you can't say, or this question can't be asked. Seeing that Huiyan's expression was a little strange, Lu Chen didn't show any fear, and calmly asked another question. Huiyan was silent for a while, then said, I don't know. Huiyan said, for so many years, everyone who came here followed the teachings of our ancestors. No one has ever doubted these words, and no one has ever asked this question. Lu Chen nodded, and didn't say anything more. Huiyan's gaze was fixed on Lu Chen. After a while, he suddenly said, I originally thought that you were a gift from the fire god to our Black Fire tribe, and that you would lead our tribe to prosperity. But now, I suddenly can't make up my mind. Why is that? Lu Chen raised his eyebrows. He wasn't angry, but asked Huiyan curiously. Huiyan's face showed some hesitation, then he said, along the way, I could see that although you have the same power as the fire god, you don't have any reverence for the fire god. Not only that, you have no reverence for our tribe, for all the rules, customs, and gods of the southern wilderness. This tall and burly barbarian stood on the burning river of lava. From afar, it seemed as if his entire body was burning. He stared at Lu Chen, a complicated expression on his face, and his voice became abnormally low. I now feel that everything you do in the future will be out of line with the people of the wasteland. It will be unexpected, and there will be unpredictable consequences. I also don't know what you will do when you become the priest of our Black Fire tribe, and lead us to a true revival. Will it be good or bad for our tribe? So, you regret it? Lu Chen asked lightly. Then, on the black rock that suddenly burst into flames in the lava, the two men suddenly became silent. They faced each other, looking straight at each other, and there seemed to be sparks flying in their eyes. After an unknown amount of time, when the stiff and cold atmosphere seemed to reach an unbearable point, Huiyan suddenly turned around and walked forward. At the same time, he said in a low voice, Follow me, the altar is right in front of us. Looking at the tall figure of the barbarian, Lu Chen was silent for a moment, but he still followed. For the rest of the time, the two of them did not speak. They walked one after another, leaping over several extremely dangerous lava fractures. It was equivalent to making a big circle around the surroundings, and then gradually moving inwards, approaching the huge black rock with the fire god's altar one ring at a time. Halfway through, Lu Chen suddenly felt that this strange and complicated path was actually somewhat like a circle of inward converging whirlpools, just like the huge whirlpool that appeared in the magma river under the Vulcan altar. Was it a coincidence? Lu Chen glanced at the lava whirlpool that was getting closer and closer. His expression was calm, without any change, but a trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. The two of them walked in this manner for almost 3 rounds, before finally finishing this inexplicably long stone path. Very quickly, at the last place close to the Vulcan altar, an abnormally wide fracture appeared in front of the two of them. It was almost twice the width of the other places. The surging, roaring, and scorching lava flowed under the rock, making one's hair stand on end. Although the scene in front of them looked very dangerous, to Huiyan and Lu Chen, it was not too difficult. Huiyan could be considered as the strongest among the ordinary barbarian warriors. His strength was ferocious, and his agility was valiant. With a leap with all his might, he jumped over the fracture. As for Lu Chen, with the support of the black flames, it was not a problem for him to pass through this obstacle. After seeing Lu Chen's body lit up with the light of the black flames, and after jumping over the fracture, Huiyan's tensed face finally softened a little. He nodded to Lu Chen, then turned around and walked towards the location of the 5 black stone pillars. Hey! At this moment, Lu Chen suddenly opened his mouth to call out. Huiyan's body paused for a moment, then he turned to look at him and said, What's wrong? Lu Chen looked straight into his eyes, his expression calm, and said, Before we go to the altar, I feel that there are some things that I should say to you. Huiyan was silent for a moment, then nodded and walked to Lu Chen's side, saying, Speak. If we don't talk about the fire god that you all worship, from the beginning, it was you who insisted that I enter the Black Fire tribe to help you, and used the secret of returning to the north to threaten me. From the beginning to the end, I did not take the initiative to get involved in your tribe's matters, is that right? But that is indeed the fire god. Lu Chen interrupted Huiyan's words, and said, I said, if we don't talk about the fire god's decree for now, is that right? Huiyan slightly lowered his head, and after a moment, he nodded and said, yes. Lu Chen said, at the same time, you also saw that I am a human, different from you. But after weighing the pros and cons, even if you had to face many objections and suspicions, you still chose to believe in me, and wanted me to help you, is that right? Huiyan took a deep breath, and his face became somewhat solemn. After a while, he said, yes. Lu Chen lightly said, then you should also understand that as a human, I have no interest in your tribe or anything in the southern wilderness. I am here today only to find out from you a way to return to the north. And to do this, I can only obtain it by helping your tribe to become strong again. So I can only help you, you don't have to doubt me on this. But other than that, my actions in the future will definitely not be exactly what you expect. If it is really for the prosperity of the Black Fire tribe, you have to give me a promise right now. Can you completely trust me? Otherwise, what if you suddenly turn hostile and stab me in the back when I am halfway through my task? Then wouldn't I be wronged? Huiyan became silent, and after a while, he said in a low voice, all the barbarians in the wilderness believe in the gods, and worship the ancestors of the tribe. Only you are not. Lu Chen shrugged his shoulders and said, you are right. Huiyan suddenly became a little agitated, and his face became a little red. He took a step forward and said, I am not asking you to do anything excessive, it is just, at this point, he was momentarily speechless, as if he did not know how to continue. Lu Chen picked up where he left off and said, don't do anything out of line. Don't do things that you cannot accept, or other things that you barbarians cannot stand. Huiyan clenched his teeth and said in a deep voice, the rules of the wilderness must be followed by every barbarian. But I am not a barbarian. The two people looked at each other, their eyes bright and sharp like blades, and there seemed to be sparks flying in the snow-white light. However, since ancient times, the truth that silence could not solve all problems was the first to come true. After a while, Huiyan said, then what do you want to do? I can't really let you lead the Black Fire tribe to an irreversible situation. Lu Chen said, I also don't know what I want to do, but you have to understand that I don't know what the Black Fire tribe needs to do to rise again, and what it needs to face. But... He fixed his eyes on Huiyan, and suddenly laughed. He then said calmly, actually, I have a question that I want to ask you. What? You're the most powerful barbarian I've ever seen since I came to the southern wilderness. Your insight and decisiveness are outstanding. But from your perspective, if everything goes according to the rules you've mentioned, and you don't do anything out of line, even if your tribe adds a normal priest, what are the chances of the Black Fire tribe truly reviving and returning to its former glory? Huiyan's body suddenly trembled, as if he had been shocked by an electric shock. Then he fell into silence again. After a long time, his voice seemed to be unusually stiff, but he still gritted his teeth and said bit by bit, impossible, it's too difficult. It's fine if the other tribes don't have priests, but the tribes with priests are already very powerful, almost no weaker than our Black Fire. Even if you're a little more powerful than ordinary priests because of the gift from the fire god, there are still the most powerful tribes in the wilderness further away, and there are also the few shamans. When the word shaman came out of Huiyan's mouth, Lu Chen saw fear and reverence in his eyes. Perhaps this was the natural belief of all barbarians in the wilderness. Then, Lu Chen laughed. He walked over and gently patted the tall and burly barbarian's shoulder. He said in a gentle tone, since it's like this, why don't you let me try? Although it's still very difficult, what if there's a little hope of success? You see, after all, our wishes are the same. You want the tribe to be strong, and I want to return to the north. Even if there are some unusual places along the way, it's not important, right? What do you think? Lu Chen said to Huiyan with a smile. Huiyan was silent for a long time, a variety of complicated expressions flashed across his face. But in the end, he finally nodded slowly and heavily. You are right, he said in a low voice. Chapter 308. This underground altar, which had been burning and rumbling in the depths of the earth and had not been known to outsiders for many years, seemed to have long been in ruins. Although the surrounding lava river was very grand, but the things on the black boulder had long been modeled and peeled off over the years. There were cracks all over the 5 black stone pillars, and there were even gaps in many places. Other than that, Lu Chen didn't see anything like the legendary fire god statue on the black boulder. It was called an altar, but there wasn't even a statue of the god. This seemed a little unusual, or perhaps the customs of the barbarians were different from those of the northern human race? Lu Chen asked Huiyan this question in his heart, but Huiyan did not know. He only said that when he came here, the fire god altar was already like this. But at the same time, Huiyan confidently told Lu Chen that there was not much difference between the barbarians and the human race when it came to worshipping the gods. It could even be said that most of the time, the barbarians actually respected and worshipped the gods more than the human race, so their ceremonies were more solemn. Usually, on an altar, there would be a statue of a deity that was enshrined. At this point, Huiyan's expression became a little strange, and he looked at Lu Chen. Lu Chen said helplessly, or was it passed down from the earliest ancestors of your Black Fire tribe? Yes. Lu Chen thought for a moment, and said, then in your tribe, what does the supreme fire god look like? Huiyan's face immediately revealed a look of reverence. He gestured in the air with his hand and said, it is a gigantic ball of scorching flames. It is the first ball of fire that was born at the beginning of the world, the ancestor of all flames. Lu Chen frowned, and asked, it is a flame? Huiyan nodded his head heavily. Suddenly, as if he had come to a sudden realization, he clapped his hands together and said excitedly, I know. This place is filled with lava and raging flames, like a disaster. Flames are everywhere, isn't this the incarnation of the fire god? It is basically omnipresent, so why bother to erect a statue of a god? As soon as he finished speaking, Huiyan's face was filled with excitement. Waving his hand at Lu Chen, he quickly walked to the center of the 5 black pillars and knelt down. Lu Chen walked over slowly, but his eyes were constantly looking around. As far as he was concerned, he still had some doubts about the existence of the fire god. Naturally, he did not have any faith or reverence. When he walked to the center of the altar, he did not even have the intention to kneel. However, this was not an ordinary place after all. It was a place where gods were worshipped. In addition, the Black Fire tribe was once powerful for a period of time, and even had many powerful shamans. Therefore, Lu Chen had to be careful in secret. Huiyan kowtowed a few times on the ground, praying and chanting. But after waiting for a while, he found that there was no movement in the surroundings. He hurriedly looked back, and his face was filled with anger and anxiety. He reached out and pulled on Lu Chen's clothes, and said in a low voice, quickly kneel down and worship the fire god. Lu Chen was speechless. Just as he was about to retort, he sighed in his heart when he saw Huiyan's expression. In the end, he still knelt down and imitated Huiyan's previous actions. He actually began to kowtow. He was a shadow that had lived in the darkness since he was young. Apart from the agreement he had with Lord Tianlan in the depths of his heart, Lu Chen did not have much faith in the first half of his life. Or it could be said that Lu Chen was actually not sure whether there were gods in this world. Since he had no faith, he naturally did not have any persistence. In the past, when he was a spy in the evil cult, he had knelt many times, including to his master and the evil cult's god. Apart from the devoutness on the surface, he had always been sneering in the depths of his heart. He coldly looked at the world, looked at human feelings, looked at all gods and ghosts, and had no faith. On this day, when he knelt down in front of the altar that was surrounded by burning flames, for some reason, Lu Chen suddenly seemed to see through himself. What kind of person was this? He suddenly felt a chill in his heart, and there was some confusion in the depths of his eyes. The same resolute and devoutness of faith that had deceived the world's most cunning and treacherous evil cult members 10 years ago, right now, in front of a barbarian like Huayan, Lu Chen's performance could be said to be flawless. Even Lu Chen's performance was too perfect, and even Huayan himself was stunned. He did not dare to believe it. Not long ago, this person was still suspicious of the fire god, but right now, he had suddenly become so devout. The change was really too great. But no matter what, this was the time to worship the god at the fire god altar. Devoutness was much better than arrogance and rudeness. Therefore, Huayan felt even more gratified, turned around and continued to kowtow. The two of them faced the empty fire god altar and worshipped for a long time. The surrounding magma surged and flowed, and there were 5 black stone pillars standing majestically, but other than that, there was no other movement. Huayan raised his head in puzzlement, and looked around. At the same time, Lu Chen's voice came from behind, asking, "When you came here to worship before, was it also like this?" Huayan hesitated for a moment, and said, "Yes. Because our ancestors said, the fire god has always only responded to the prayers of priests or shamans. No matter how devout we barbarian warriors are, because we don't have that spiritual power, the fire god will not pay attention to us." As he said this, his eyebrows slightly raised, and he looked at Lu Chen, saying, "You have the spiritual power of the fire god in your body, the same origin and the same kind. If you are really our priest, the fire god will definitely respond to you." At this moment, there was already some sharpness within Huayan's eyes. However, Lu Chen did not panic. After musing for a moment, he stood up and extended his hand to touch his chest. A faint light flashed and the half of the fire god's staff once again appeared in his hand. Seeing the appearance of the fire god's staff, Huayan's face suddenly showed some excitement, and he stood up immediately. Lu Chen waved his hand at him, indicating that he should not be excited. At the same time, he stood to the side, and then walked alone to the center of the 5 black stone pillars. He looked around with a solemn expression, but in his heart, he sneered. Then, he suddenly raised the half of the fire god's staff high above his head, and both of his hands tightly grasped the staff. At the same time, he seemed to be mumbling something, but in reality, he was just randomly humming a few times. But unexpectedly, in his eyes, a black flame suddenly appeared, and a dark and powerful aura suddenly gushed out from his body. With a "hoo" sound, the black flame emerged from Lu Chen's body, swaying and dancing wildly, burning, but completely ignoring his clothes. And almost at the same time, the fire god staff in Lu Chen's hand suddenly lit up. The light was dazzling, as if a scorching sun had suddenly lit up in the depths of the earth, emitting a radiance that was tens of thousands of feet long. All kinds of twisted, strange runes flashed and lit up on the fire god's staff. A majestic and ancient aura, far more majestic than before, suddenly emitted from the ancient staff. Huayan, who was standing outside of the 5 black stone pillars, for a moment could not look directly at the dazzling light, and subconsciously used his hands to cover his eyes. But after a moment, he suddenly heard a deafening roar coming from behind him. At the same time, the huge black stone under his feet also began to shake and tremble. His footing was unstable, and the sky and earth were spinning. The tens of thousands of feet of light were dazzling, and there was even the sound of a surging tide. It was as if the depths of the earth had suddenly boiled. When Huayan turned around in shock, he saw that in this huge underground cavern, the lava river that originally seemed to have calmly flowed for thousands of years, had completely changed. The scorching and terrifying red lava roared and roared, as if it was boiling. Wave after wave surged up, the waves rising higher and higher, and gradually began to overflow the black stones, submerging them one by one. The huge black stone where the fire god altar was located was the highest point, but countless amounts of lava rushed over from all directions, crazily hitting the huge stone. The huge black stone began to shake violently. Huoyan stood on top, almost unable to stand steadily. His entire face was pale with fright. Behind him, the person holding the fire god's staff seemed to be oblivious to the increasingly dangerous situation outside, as if a disaster was about to befall them. He only held the staff in his hand, looking up at the sky. In the depths of the brilliance, under the shadow of the strong light, at that moment, Lu Chen's mind suddenly recalled that day in the wilderness of the land of chaos, the last words of the dying old barbarian priest. Bring the fire god staff back to the southern wilderness, bring it back to the fire god altar, bring it back to the fire god's side. He originally thought that this was the most ridiculous thing in the world, and also the most impossible thing to achieve. But in the unseen world, after a few turns, he suddenly discovered that he was actually standing here. Could it be that there really was a deity in this world, that the fire god really existed? He stared at the depths of the distant shadow outside the brilliant flames, remained silent, and then suddenly raised the fire god's staff, heavily knocked on the huge black stone, right in the middle of the altar. Boom! The entire underground cave instantly shook. All the lava in that instant soared into the sky. A terrifying and suffocating scorching feeling was about to drown everything, until a beam of light shone in from the side of the huge black stone. Under the huge lava whirlpool, a ray of brilliance rose up, a magnificent roar resounded throughout the underground, like an ancient elegy recounting the sad past. In the depths of the brilliance, half of the staff was surrounded by raging flames, burning, emitting thousands of rays of brilliance. It curled up from the lava whirlpool, rose all the way to the peak of the lava, and then flew towards the fire god altar. Lu Chen silently looked at the flying staff, suddenly threw out the half of the fire god's staff in his hand. The two staffs converged in midair with a loud bang, the fiery light suddenly flourished, magma danced wildly all around, crazily surging up to the dome, but only the huge rock of the altar was not tainted in the slightest. After a moment, the light dissipated, the two staffs in midair had already converged into one, and then flew downwards. A buzzing sound was heard, directly piercing into the incomparably hard black stone. Chapter 309. After an unknown number of years, they once again merged into one, forming a complete fire god staff. It was calmly inserted into the black boulder. The black boulder that could withstand the terrifying heat was easily pierced through like tofu in front of the fire god's staff. Lu Chen took 2 steps back, then glanced at Huoyan who was standing at the side. He saw that this barbarian's face was filled with excitement. All the doubts, worries, and hesitation that he once had, were now completely gone. In this ancient holy land, the god of fire had once again proven to him that he was not wrong about him. This human was indeed the messenger that the fire god had specially chosen. He carried the will of the fire god, and together with the black fire tribe, he would bear the heavy responsibility of reviving the tribe. At this moment, he felt Lu Chen's gaze on him, and also looked at him. At the same time, he nodded excitedly, as if he did not know what to say. Lu Chen walked to his side, and softly said, "It has never been like this before?" Huoyan said, "Yes, it has been a few generations, a few hundred years, and the fire god has never responded to us like this on the altar." Lu Chen looked around, and saw that with the revival of the fire god's staff, the surging and roaring magma had already begun to calm down, returning to its original state of slow flowing. However, on the many black boulders, one could still clearly see the traces of the previous crazy burn. Those ghastly scars were like the angry roars of a god, causing people to tremble just by looking at them. Lu Chen said to Huoyan, "The fire god's staff has been revived. Don't you want to go and worship it, or pick it up to take a look?" Huoyan was silent for a moment, then he firmly shook his head and said, "There's no need. This is a divine weapon that the fire god bestowed upon you. It's useless for me to take it." "A divine weapon, huh?" Lu Chen smiled faintly and walked to the front of the fire god's staff. He stretched out his hand and held the staff. His eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the fire god's staff that seemed to be flowing with brilliance and had an extraordinary aura. After a moment, he didn't seem to use much strength. It was as if he had just raised his arm slightly, and the fire god's staff rose from the ground. All sorts of brilliance flowed and flickered, and then slowly settled down. Finally, all of it retracted back into the staff and disappeared, turning the fire god's staff back into a seemingly ordinary staff. A strange and subtle aura came from where Lu Chen was holding the divine staff, echoing in his mind. Scenes that seemed like ancient poems or scenes from the past appeared one by one. His vision suddenly darkened. At that moment, it was as if Lu Chen's entire body had suddenly lost all weight. His entire body floated up, as if he was in an endless darkness. Then he raised his head and lowered his head. In front of him and behind him, countless stars lit up, layer upon layer, endless. There was a delicate incantation that came from the depths of this empty starry sky. It drilled into his mind and turned into strange characters that were engraved in his heart. It was as if the eyes of the gods were looking at him, and the magnificent and great Sanskrit was faintly humming. There was the light of a flame burning, rapid and grand. In an instant, it burned through the starry sky and swallowed everything, no matter if it was light or darkness. Therefore, there was only raging fire left in the void. Everywhere was a sea of fire. The flames surrounded Lu Chen's body. It was as if there were countless arms tearing at his body, wanting to tear him into pieces. A terrifying pain suddenly rose up. There was actually a sense of familiarity. It was the pain of the curse that had entangled him for the past 10 years. And in the depths of the flames in front of him, there was a huge screen of flames that suddenly rose up. There was a terrifying mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, from ancient times to the present, from the sky to the earth. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound exploded like thunder from a clear sky. It caused Lu Chen, who was in a daze, to suddenly wake up. When he turned to look, he saw that Huiyan's face was filled with shock. Huiyan's hands were tightly hugging Lu Chen's body. Lu Chen did not know when, but he was already standing at the edge of the huge black rock. Half of his foot had already stepped out and was suspended above the magma outside. If he took another step, he would be consigned to eternal damnation and die without a complete corpse. Huiyan roared angrily. He dragged Lu Chen a few steps back, away from the frightening edge of the black rock. Perhaps because they were too agitated and used too much force, the two of them even fell to the ground together. "What's wrong with you?" Huiyan leapt up and glared at Lu Chen as he roared. Lu Chen was silent for a moment. Then, he slowly stood up. His gaze swept across the fire god's staff that was still in his hand. After a while, he briefly described to Huiyan the scene he had just seen. Then, he asked, "Probably. I saw the fire god that you revere?" Huiyan's body shook violently. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face. But soon after, he seemed to have thought of something and silently nodded his head. There was an excited expression on his face. "Is it because the fire god's power is too great that you can't control it for a while?" Huiyan probed. Lu Chen recalled the scene he had just experienced. It actually somewhat overlapped with a certain scene in the depths of his memory. This caused him to subconsciously stretch out his hand to touch his chest. After a moment of silence, he said to Huiyan, "When your Black Fire tribe still had priests, was the so-called inheritance of law and power all like this?" Huiyan immediately shook his head. He seemed very certain as he said, "No. Although our tribe hasn't had a priest for many years, I have long heard of what happened in the past from my father. When the priests were still in our tribe, every generation of priests were directly taught by the shaman or priest of the previous generation. Except." At this point, his expression suddenly changed. Lu Chen immediately sensed the change in Huiyan's expression. He asked, "Except what?" The excitement on Huiyan's face faded slightly. There seemed to be a little more surprise and doubt. When he looked at Lu Chen again, there were some complicated emotions in his eyes. He said, "Except in the legends, our tribe's first-generation shaman ancestor, we call him the Great Shaman. It is said that the Great Shaman was the first barbarian to comprehend the power of the fire god. Only he was able to directly obtain the spiritual power of the fire god in the Sea of Fire." He glanced at Lu Chen. After gritting his teeth, he said, "Just like you did today. Let's go." Lu Chen said to Huoyan. Huoyan agreed. Just as he was about to turn around, he turned his head worriedly to look at Lu Chen. With a trace of nervousness, he said to Lu Chen, "Did you really comprehend the power of the fire god?" Lu Chen smiled. "I also don't know how strong its power is, so I can't say for sure. But from the looks of it, it should be okay, especially when I have this fire god staff." Huoyan looked at him with some doubt. But he didn't ask much. After all, there was still a long way to go. He turned around to go back the way he came. "Wait a minute." Lu Chen stopped him. "Let's go another way." "Another way?" Huoyan was stunned. Lu Chen took 2 steps forward. His face was calm. His eyes gazed at the sea of magma in front of him. Suddenly, he raised the fire god staff with both hands, drew it in the air, and pointed it forward. In the huge cavern, there was a sudden gust of wind. The whistling sound circled around Lu Chen. Light flashed from the fire god staff. After a moment, an ancient, powerful, vast and boundless aura emitted from Lu Chen's body. The flowing magma suddenly sped up, as if it had suddenly become agitated. And under the magma, there was a rumbling sound, as if the earth was shaking. Not long after, there was suddenly a loud sound. Amidst the rumbling sound, a cluster of black rose from the scarlet magma. It was the black stones that were similar to the surroundings. Following that, more and more black stones rose. The magma was like a raging beast, roaring and roaring continuously. However, it could not stop the black stones that rose abruptly from biting and joining together, forming a black bridge that spanned across the entire sea of magma and fire. When everything calmed down again, Lu Chen and Huoyan stood on this newly appeared bridge that seemed to still have the scorching aura of the magma below. Remnants of fire could be seen everywhere on the bridge. They looked at each other. Then, Huoyan nodded. Lu Chen smiled and walked forward. At the same time, he said, "Let's go from here, a new path." Chapter 310. As they walked out of the underground cavern, Atsu came up to greet them. This black wolf seemed to have sensed something and kept staring at Lu Chen. But other than that, Atsu didn't do anything else. It didn't roar, but just quietly followed behind Lu Chen, all the way back to the surface. They didn't know how long they stayed underground. When they returned to the Black Stone Canyon, the sky was dark. It was already late at night. In the vast night sky, countless stars twinkled, like pearls decorating the deep sky. Under the starry sky, the mountains and the earth seemed to become insignificant. Those who looked up at the starry sky seemed to feel like they were just a speck of dust. Under the starry sky, in the night wind, they gazed into the distance for a long time. The wind faintly carried their soft and indistinct voices, as if they were discussing something. Maybe it was the heaven and earth, or maybe it was the past, or maybe it was the future hope of this path. Afterwards, they turned around and left this place, causing this originally desolate gorge to once again sink into silence. Only the cold starlight lingered in this place, unwilling to give up. On the way back, Huoyan and Lu Chen were extremely careful. However, compared to their previous journey, their journey this time seemed to be smoother. Not only did they rarely encounter any powerful demonic beasts, they didn't even encounter any powerful clans or tribes. As for the incomparably powerful Thunder Cloud tribe that unexpectedly appeared near the northern border, it seemed to have already left this place, relieving them of one of their biggest worries. In Lu Chen's eyes, this was really good luck. In Huayan's eyes, this was the blessing of the fire god. Because of all these reasons, they returned almost 2 days earlier than expected. They arrived near the Black Fire tribe's camp that day. This was originally a comfortable and happy journey, until they saw a few plumes of black smoke rising from the Black Fire tribe's camp. Atsu suddenly roared towards the front, the hair on its neck stood up, and its eyes revealed a fierce light. Huayan and Lu Chen's expressions changed almost at the same time. Huayan roared angrily and rushed forward. At the same time, a trace of fear faintly appeared on his face. Lu Chen followed behind the furious barbarian warrior. His eyebrows were tightly knitted, and his mood was indescribably complicated. Of course, he didn't have the same deep feelings for the Black Fire tribe as Huayan did. To be honest, if it wasn't for the secret of returning north from Huayan, he really wouldn't care if this damn tribe was dead or alive, or if it was thriving or declining. But now that they had boarded the pirate ship, Lu Chen of course hoped that the Black Fire tribe would have better luck. At this moment, Lu Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the murderous black smoke in front of him. Reviving the Black Fire tribe was an extremely difficult mission. If the Black Fire tribe was destroyed before he took over, that would truly make him want to cry, but no tears would come out. It was obvious that Huayan had also thought of this. His worry for the tribe drove him to the brink of insanity in his anger and fear. He roared as he rushed forward. Lu Chen, on the other hand, was much calmer as he followed behind him. His gaze swept across the surrounding desert, carefully observing the movements behind the sand dune plants. They rushed all the way into the Black Fire tribe's camp. Along the way, the two did not meet with any obstructions or enemies. But the scene that greeted them caused Huayan to stop in his tracks and hold his breath. The huge camp of the tribe was in a complete mess. Many houses had collapsed. Traces of fighting and burning could be seen everywhere. In the ruins of the village, among the rocks and charred firewood, the corpses of barbarians could be seen lying motionless on the ground from time to time. The smell of blood drifted from the front along with the wind. Huayan suddenly let out an inhuman howl of pain, like a despairing demonic beast in a hopeless situation. A trickle of blood flowed from the side of his mouth. He had bitten his lips. At that moment, his eyes were filled with regret, and his body was trembling slightly. With a thud, he finally knelt on the ground. He clenched his fists and pounded the ground in front of him with all his might, as if he had gone mad. But at this moment, a hand suddenly reached out from the side and pulled him back. Huayan's body stopped, and he raised his head to look with a pair of bloodshot and furious eyes. It was Lu Chen who had come to his side. Huayan stared at Lu Chen, his eyes burning with a flame that could kill him. But Lu Chen didn't seem to notice it. His face was calm as usual, as if the tragic scene around him had no meaning to him. He just lowered his body slightly and said to Huayan in a low voice, "There are too few corpses. Your tribe has far more people than this." Huayan's body shook, as if he had suddenly woken up. The expression in his eyes quickly calmed down. After a while, he nodded to Lu Chen, gritted his teeth and stood up. He then quickly walked into the depths of the camp and began to examine the surrounding situation. He dragged out the barbarian corpses from the ruins and placed them in an open space. About an hour later, the two of them had searched the entire Black Fire tribe's camp. Then, they dragged out the corpses and placed them in the open space in the middle of the camp. There were a total of 11 corpses. Among the 11 corpses, 3 or 4 of them had been badly burned and their faces could no longer be seen clearly. The remaining corpses were obviously old men or women. There was not a single one of the young, strong, and ferocious barbarian warriors of the Black Fire tribe. Huayan and Lu Chen stood side by side next to the 11 corpses. Atsu did not seem to like the scene here. He ran to the sandy ground outside the camp and lay down. A mournful wind blew from the wilderness from afar. Lu Chen turned his head to look at Huyen. When the wind ruffled the hair of this brave and burly barbarian, Lu Chen saw that there was still pain and regret in his eyes. But at the same time, it was obvious that he was relieved. These people are all my tribesmen. Huyen's voice sounded very low, but very clear. 8 old men and 3 women. I can call out their names. As he said this, he pointed at the corpses, pressed his hand on his chest, and lowered his head in silence. Lu Chen waited for a while, then calmly said, "From the situation here, it is very likely that the Black Fire tribe was ambushed by external enemies. But from the corpses, it should be the warriors of your tribe who escorted most of your tribesmen out of here." Here, he paused and said, "We are going to look for them." Huyen glanced at him and said, "Why can't it be another tribe who ambushed and defeated our tribe, and then abducted all of our people?" Lu Chen shook his head and said, "With your usual vision and calmness, there is no way that you can't figure out the reason behind this. You are just confused now. The warriors of the Black Fire tribe are brave and valiant. At least in my opinion, there is no one who is afraid of death. If it really came to that, the number of corpses here today would be 10 times more." Huyen closed his eyes and was silent for a long time. Then he let out a long breath and said, "You are right." He stared at Lu Chen and said in a low voice, "It seems that I was right to ask you to be the priest." Lu Chen smiled and said, "I said, these are not difficult things to hide. If it were you, you would be able to see it too. It is just that you are too worried now." Huyen clenched his fist tightly and looked at the corpses on the ground. He silently lowered his head and said a few words, then suddenly turned and walked out of the camp. At the same time, he said, "Let's go, we will go after them." Lu Chen followed. At this moment, Atsu, who was outside the camp, suddenly stood up. After stretching his body, he suddenly faced the vast sky and let out a long howl. The mournful howl of the wolf echoed in this cold and desolate wasteland. Chapter 3:11. As they walked out of the camp, Huyen asked Lu Chen if there was any way to find the missing tribesmen through witchcraft. Lu Chen naturally shook his head and denied it. At the same time, he had a new understanding of the unfathomable superstition of witchcraft of these barbarians. However, it seemed that Huyen did not have much hope in this matter. He was just hoping for a fluke. After receiving Lu Chen's reply, he frowned and observed the surroundings. After a moment of contemplation, he led Lu Chen in a certain direction. "Do you have an idea?" Lu Chen was a little surprised, and asked beside him. Huyen wanted to say something but stopped. He smiled bitterly and said, "It's not easy to survive in the northern part of the wilderness. Normally, every tribe would leave a way out for themselves. There's such a place in front of us. Let's go and take a look first." Lu Chen nodded and felt a little relieved. Since there was such a way out, it was highly likely that most of the Black Fire tribe had escaped. Although he did not have any deep feelings for this tribe, he still hoped that the Black Fire tribe would be well. Otherwise, it would be really embarrassing for the entire tribe to be exterminated right after they accepted the fire god's gift to become the tribe's priest. Not thinking about this matter any longer, Lu Chen quickly thought of another important question. He glanced at Huyen and said in a low voice, "Can you tell who the enemy was?" Huyen's body paused for a moment. A trace of anger flashed across his eyes, but he shook his head. However, after a moment of silence, Huyen said, "It's none other than the other tribes in this land. The Thunder Lizard, the Divine Wood, the Ghost Fox, and the Mountain Spirit tribe that we defeated a few days ago." Lu Chen frowned and said, "The Mountain Spirit tribe suffered heavy losses that day and their priest died. I don't think it's possible. But let's not talk about whether they have the ability or not. At the very least, it makes sense that the Mountain Spirit tribe would come back for revenge. But you don't trust the 3 tribes that fought with the Mountain Spirit tribe that day?" Huyen coldly laughed. His face was cold as he said, "We're all living in this barren land. Who can trust anyone else? If there's a chance, I won't hesitate to stab someone in the back. Lu Chen looked at him deeply, then nodded and said, I see. On the way to the secret hiding place of the Black Fire tribe, Huiyan, who had gradually calmed down, introduced the situation of the land where the Black Fire tribe was located to Lu Chen, the future priest of the Black Fire tribe. Just as he had said before, because this was the most desolate and harsh place in the southern wilderness, the relationship between the few tribes living here was very subtle. Conflicts between the tribes would occur from time to time. Including the original Mountain Spirit tribe, among the 5 tribes here, the Black Fire tribe had always been in the middle position. It wasn't the strongest, but it wasn't the weakest either. But compared to the glorious history of many years ago, the current Black Fire tribe was, of course, extremely unworthy. This made Huiyan, a barbarian who cherished his ancestors, feel depressed and humiliated. Among the 5 tribes, there were strong and weak ones, but overall, there wasn't much of a difference. Otherwise, if a tribe was really weak, it would have long been swallowed up by others. And if a tribe suddenly became strong, like the Mountain Spirit tribe not long ago, then the other tribes would band together and attack it. It could be considered a strange and dangerous balance. Lu Chen asked about the situation in detail and then became thoughtful along the way. The two of them walked with the Atsu tribe. After about half a day's journey, they arrived at a rare oasis in the desert. But this oasis looked very small. There wasn't much water, and the surrounding forest didn't look very lush, as if it could dry up at any time. There was no one around this small oasis. Occasionally, they would see 1 or 2 lone monsters running from the desert in the distance. They were probably there to drink a few mouthfuls of water. Lu Chen looked at the oasis with some doubt. No matter how he looked at it, although this small oasis could provide some water, it didn't seem like a place that could hide such a large population of the Black Fire tribe. Sure enough, Huiyan didn't walk directly into the small oasis. Instead, he circled around and walked to the back of the oasis. There were 5 or 6 connected sand dunes there, looking like an uneven sand wall. There were also some protruding rocks buried in the sand, only a small part of them exposed on the ground. Lu Chen followed Huiyan to the back of the sand dunes and watched him walk all the way to a large rock at the back of the sand dunes. Huiyan stuck his left hand into the sand and pulled it open. There was a soft rustling sound as the sand flowed. At the same time, a stone slab was pushed open, revealing a black hole. Lu Chen unconsciously took a step forward. At the same time, he cursed in his heart. Did the Black Fire tribe worship the god of fire or the god of earth? Why do they like to dig holes in the ground every day? Looking at the pitch-black cave entrance, before they could even make a move, they heard a few angry curses coming from inside the cave. A few cold lights flashed, and a moment later, 2 figures jumped out, roaring angrily as they slashed at Huiyan and Lu Chen. Lu Chen took 2 steps back and let them go. He didn't have any intention of fighting back. With Huiyan around, this kind of thing would naturally be easily settled. Sure enough, Huiyan dodged the chopping axe and shouted, "Stop, it's me." The 2 barbarian warriors, who were originally full of murderous intent, trembled when they heard this. Then, their eyes revealed a look of surprise as they looked at Huiyan. They shouted in unison and almost simultaneously rushed forward, hugging Huiyan and shouting a few words. Their expressions were extremely excited. Huiyan was also very happy. After all, he didn't come empty-handed. Since there were people here, it was very likely that the other tribesmen were here as well. Even so, he still had to ask them personally. Huiyan grabbed a barbarian beside him and asked anxiously, "Black Bull, what about the others? Are they all right?" The barbarian warrior called Black Bull nodded repeatedly and pointed to the hole. "The tribesmen are hiding in there. They're fine for the time being." As he said this, a trace of sadness flashed across his face. "But at the camp, we didn't have time to save them. A few of them died. I'm sorry, Huayan. When you weren't here, we didn't protect the tribe well. Huayan patted Black Bull's shoulder and said in a deep voice, "It's not your fault. Come, bring me in to have a look." The Black Bull hurriedly agreed. Just as he took a step forward, a startled expression suddenly appeared on his face. Only at this moment did he see Lu Chen and Atu standing to the side. Furthermore, he saw Lu Chen's extremely calm expression as he leisurely walked over and walked shoulder to shoulder with Huayan towards the cave entrance. In Lu Chen's hand, the fire god's staff, which was half its original length and had become complete, was in his hand. Just as Black Bull was in a daze, a voice suddenly came from the front. It wasn't Huayan's, but the human male. He asked Black Bull, "Do you know who the enemy who launched a sneak attack on the tribe is?" Black Bull opened his mouth but didn't say anything. His expression was a little strange. But at the same time, Huayan's dignified voice came again. "Speak. Lu Chen is now the priest of our Black Fire tribe. He's the messenger sent by the Supreme Fire God. Messenger of the Fire God. Priest." The two barbarian warriors, including Black Bull, were immediately stunned. They didn't dare to believe it, but Huayan's prestige was extremely high, so they didn't dare to question him. They could only follow behind him with strange expressions on their faces. Only when Lu Chen asked again did they wake up as if they had just woken up from a dream. They replied, "It was done by the Divine Wood tribe." Chapter 312. Divine Wood tribe? Huayan and Lu Chen glanced at each other, but didn't say anything. The two walked into the cave, and after passing through a narrow passageway, the front suddenly opened up to reveal an extremely spacious cave. At the same time, there were several torches lit, but it didn't make people feel suffocated. It was obvious that there was another unobstructed vent. Most of the people of the Black Fire tribe were gathered here. Hearing the sound of footsteps, someone turned around and immediately saw the tall and sturdy Huayan, and immediately cried out in surprise. This movement quickly alerted the other people. Especially those tall and strong barbarian warriors in the crowd. They gathered around Yishiwen one after another. Their faces were filled with pleasant surprise. Huayan walked over, bumping chests and clapping with these warriors. His voice was deep and powerful, and the surrounding people all showed their respect and submission to him. Lu Chen clearly saw this from the side, and could feel that Huayan indeed had great prestige in this tribe. Previously, when the Black Fire tribe was ambushed by the Divine Wood tribe, although they suffered a great loss and even lost their camp, on the way back, the tribe's vitality was not damaged, and the elite warriors were almost all alive. In this kind of situation, if Huayan was also in the tribe, with his command, it would be hard to say who would win or lose. It was clear that Lu Chen was not the only one who had such thoughts. Many of the barbarian warriors had also mentioned this matter to Huayan when he walked past them. Their faces were filled with anger and unwillingness. Huayan silently nodded, but didn't say anything, and just continued walking forward. And Lu Chen, who had been following behind Huayan, also attracted many strange gazes. But after the previous incident at the Black Fire tribe's camp, these barbarians looked at Lu Chen with a much more relaxed gaze. Walking through the crowd and into the depths of the cave, he saw two people coming from behind the crowd. They were Huayan's two relatives. His son, Huaying, was supporting the current chief of the Black Fire tribe, who was also his father, Huahu. "Father." Huayan walked in front of Huahu and called out. Flaming Tiger looked at his son, and a trace of gratification flashed across his face. He nodded and said, "It's good that you're back." As he spoke, his gaze swept past Huayan's back. When he saw Lu Chen and the intact fire god's staff in his hand, he seemed to be startled for a moment. At the same time, a haze flashed across the depths of his eyes. Huayan's return made the people of the Black Fire tribe happy and excited. The atmosphere in the tribe was obviously much higher. Many people cast their gazes over. Although they didn't shout, there was still a very strong and obvious expectation. As for what this expectation was, it was self-evident. However, no matter what it was, the core members of the clan had to sit down and discuss it. Basically, it was Huyan's family. As one of the privileges of the patriarch, Flaming Tiger occupied the best and driest place in this underground cave. The people around him automatically moved aside, and with the help of the Fire Hawk, Flaming Tiger sat down again. He seemed to be panting a little. Huyan frowned and also sat down in front of the two of them. He looked at his father with a trace of worry on his face and said, "Father, are you all right?" Flaming Tiger forced a smile and said, "That day when we were running for our lives, I was tired for a while. I'm much better now." Then, his gaze turned to the person beside Huyan. As if he didn't care about the surprised and complicated gazes of the surrounding Black Fire tribe members, he directly sat down beside Huyan and openly joined the discussion of the highest core members of the Black Fire tribe, Lu Chen. Flaming Tiger's expression was a little unhappy, but Huyan seemed to ignore it. Moreover, he felt that Lu Chen sitting down was a matter of course. However, this infuriated another hot-tempered youth. Flaming Eagle stood up and said angrily, "What right does this damned human have to sit here? Do you believe that I won't kill you with one strike?" Lu Chen's expression was indifferent. There was no joy or sorrow on his face. He only glanced at the angry brute youth and didn't say anything. Meanwhile, Huyan, who was sitting beside Lu Chen, said in a low voice, "Flaming Eagle, sit down." Flaming Eagle seemed to be somewhat afraid of his father. Although his anger didn't decrease after hearing this, he still sat down hatefully. However, he still stayed close to his grandfather, Flaming Tiger, and faintly felt that he was confronting his father, Huyan. Flaming Tiger looked coldly at the two people in front of him. A barbarian and a human, just sitting together like this, as if there was no gap between them, and their calm and composed appearance made him feel that it was particularly irritating. He looked at Huyan and said, "What's going on? Tell me." Huyan didn't beat around the bush and said straightforwardly, "These days, I brought Lu Chen to the fire god's altar. In the holy land of the altar, Lu Chen has already received the recognition and blessing of the fire god, and obtained the great power of the god's inheritance. Now, he is the priest of our Black Fire tribe, and in the future, he will guide our tribe to rise and become strong again." He didn't deliberately lower his voice. When he said these words in a loud and clear voice, apart from Flaming Tiger and Flaming Eagle, many of the surrounding barbarians of the Black Fire tribe who were paying attention to what was happening heard at the same time. Suddenly, there was an uproar. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment, and it was obvious that they couldn't accept this result for a moment. Impossible. Flaming Eagle was the first to roar, and once again stood up suddenly. Huyan also stood up, but he didn't make any move against his son in front of him. He only glanced at him, and then turned around to look at the surroundings. Facing the gazes of the many clansmen, he said in a clear voice, "The long-lost divine weapon, the fire god's staff, has now been reunited in the hands of Lu Chen. This is the best proof that the fire god has recognized him." There was another round of clamor and discussion, but it quickly quieted down. Most of the Black Fire clansmen still had expressions of shock and disbelief on their faces, but when they looked at Lu Chen, there was an inexplicable sense of intimacy in their gazes. Is that the person chosen by the supreme fire god? As if responding to Huyan's words, the fire god's scepter suddenly flickered and brightened. A dazzling brilliance lit up from the scepter. It was as dazzling as the sun, causing one to feel reverence when looking at it. After a while, suddenly from the dazzling brilliance, a ball of flame suddenly soared up, rushed into the air, burned fiercely. The entire cave people felt a wave of heat instantly hit their faces, and the ancient aura contained in it was even more powerful to the point that it made people tremble. In an instant, under the deep-rooted worship and reverence, almost all of the Black Fire tribe members knelt down. Their eyes were brimming with tears, and they bowed respectfully, cheering and praising the fire god. Hua Hu and Hua Ying, on the other hand, had expressions of shock on their faces. They did not kneel down, but neither did they reprimand him. On the contrary, Hua Yan, who was standing at the side, had a strange expression on his face. He looked at the fire god's staff, as if he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. This conversation did not reach any conclusion, and ended because of the fire god's staff's radiance. Although Lu Chen's identity was a little strange, in the Black Fire tribe, the fire god was an overwhelming power, not to mention that he had the support of the tribe's chief warrior, Hua Yan. It was also from this day onwards that Lu Chen officially made his debut in the Black Fire tribe. However, when they left, Hua Yan and Lu Chen walked side by side. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no one nearby, Hua Yan lowered his voice and asked Lu Chen, "I say, among the power passed down by the fire god, isn't the most powerful black fire?" Lu Chen smiled as he looked to his left and right, his expression unchanged. He also lowered his voice and said, "You're right. Then why did you suddenly create that flashy but impractical white light?" "Because this is the best way to deceive these idiots. If you use black fire, they might not even understand," Lu Chen said. Hua Yan was furious, but then his expression stiffened and he fell silent. After a long while, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. He sighed and did not say anything else. After Hua Yan returned to the tribe, many people in the Black Fire tribe seemed to have suddenly found a pillar of support, and their spirits rose. This was especially obvious among the barbarian warriors. Many of them could feel it, including the patriarch of the barbarian race, Hua Hu. And since Hua Yan had returned, the most important thing was to understand the matter of the Divine Wood tribe's sneak attack, and how to respond. In fact, the most important person to respond to this matter should be the chief, but the atmosphere in the Black Fire tribe seemed to be a little strange. Hua Yan's question seemed to be a matter of course, and the people beside him did not object. The beginning and the course of this matter were quickly laid out in front of Hua Yan and Lu Chen. The matter was not complicated. The situation was that one day, the Divine Wood tribe suddenly took advantage of the darkness to launch a sneak attack on the Black Fire camp. There was no warning beforehand, and there was almost no conflict between the two tribes. The people of the Black Fire tribe did not expect the Divine Wood tribe to make such a move, so they were caught unprepared. However, among the 5 tribes of the wasteland, the Black Fire tribe's warriors had always been at the highest level. It was just that the tribe did not have the most people, so their overall strength was only in the middle. The Divine Wood tribe had many people, but the battle strength of their warriors could not compare to that of the Black Fire tribe. So after this battle, although the Black Fire tribe was defeated, their losses were not great. But in the end, they had lost their base, and it was still a very embarrassing matter. Hua Yan listened to this matter with a sullen face. There were a few tribal warriors who reported this matter, including Iron Bear, whom Lu Chen had seen before, and Black Bull, whom he had seen outside the passage. Seeing how close they were to Hua Yan, it was obvious that they were Hua Yan's trusted aides. After listening, Hua Yan looked at these people with a cold face. These strong barbarian warriors looked at each other, all of them looking a little embarrassed. Hua Yan snorted coldly and said, "The warriors of the Divine Wood tribe are all trash. You were actually chased here by those trash. After everything was settled, why didn't you rush back and chop them to death?" The abnormally tall and sturdy Iron Bear raised his eyes and said, "We also thought about it." "Oh?" It was Lu Chen who interrupted and asked calmly, "From what you're saying, someone stopped you from taking revenge?" Iron Bear curled his lips and glanced at Lu Chen. "That's right." Chapter 313. Hua Yan naturally didn't take these words seriously when he said that his tribe's warriors had been chased away by trash. It was most likely something he said out of anger. He forgot what he said, so Tai Xiong, Hei Nyo, and the others didn't take it to heart. However, Lu Chen's question hit the nail on the head. Huiyan's expression changed and became ugly. After a while, he said, "What did father say?" When Huiyan wasn't in the tribe, there was only one person who could stop these hot-blooded, fierce, and brave warriors. There was no need to guess. It could only be the chief, Huahu. Tai Xiong and He Niu looked at each other with a strange expression on their faces. Lu Chen looked at them from the side. After a while, He Niu opened his mouth and laughed dryly. The chief said that this matter happened in a hurry and the people's hearts aren't stable. Everything will be discussed after you return. Huiyan was stunned for a moment. Soon after, an expression that didn't know whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face. In the end, he looked at Lu Chen and said with a bitter smile, "Then I'll go find father to discuss this." Tai Xiong and He Niu turned around and left, leaving only Lu Chen and Huiyan. Huiyan looked at Lu Chen and said, "Come with me." Lu Chen said, "Your father and your son don't seem to like me very much. Are you sure you want me to go with you?" Huiyan hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and said, "You are already our tribe's priest. In the future, there will be a time when we will meet or fight. You might as well take this opportunity to make things clear and avoid future troubles." Lu Chen calmly nodded, as if he didn't care much about this matter. Instead, he looked at Huiyan and said, "How do you plan to deal with this matter?" "Of course, we will take revenge." Huiyan said without hesitation, "In the northern wasteland, if you take a step back, others will take a step forward. If you are a bit weaker, others will be more ruthless. Moreover, if we don't do anything, those clansmen who died in the camp will have died in vain." Lu Chen grunted and said, "It's good that you've made up your mind." Huiyan turned his head to look at him. Seeing that there was no one around, he inched closer without batting an eyelid. "Do you have confidence in this battle?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "If what you said on the way here is true, as long as I go over to help, we will definitely win this battle." Huiyan was instantly overjoyed, but after the joy, he still did not dare to completely believe it. He said in a low voice, "Really? Why are you so confident?" Lu Chen spat and jokingly scolded, "I don't want to do this job, but you desperately want to drag me down with you. Now that I'm on the pirate ship, I have no choice but to help you, and you still don't believe me? If I say it's possible, then it's definitely possible. What's with all this nonsense?" Huiyan laughed heartily, his expression carefree and joyful as he strode forward. Lu Chen followed beside him and said, "But how are you so sure that your father will agree to your suggestion?" Huiyan waved his hand and smiled, "You don't understand. My father handed this matter to me a long time ago." "Oh, that's good," Lu Chen said with a smile. About an hour later, Huiyan and Lu Chen once again left the residence of the Black Fire Tribe's chief, Huahu. But this time, the expressions on both of their faces were a little strange. Lu Chen was a little surprised and a little amused, while Huiyan's face was ashen, looking angry and annoyed. As he walked, the Black Fire Tribe's clansmen all avoided him, not daring to provoke this burly chief warrior. When the two of them walked to a secluded area with no one around, Lu Chen said lightly, "What do you mean?" Huiyan suddenly let out a low roar and suddenly punched the stone wall beside him, causing a large amount of sand to fall. At the same time, he gritted his teeth and said, "Stupid, stupid. How could my father be so stupid? Whether he's stupid or not, there's nothing more to say. Now that the chief doesn't agree to send out troops for revenge, what do you plan to do?" Lu Chen stood beside Huiyan and said with a calm expression, "By the way, I've always thought that you were the one who could make the final decision in the Black Fire Tribe when we made the deal in the sacrificial altar sacred land. With the current situation, even if the two of us have the ability to reach the heavens, if we really want to strengthen the Black Fire Tribe, won't we?" Huiyan snorted and said, "My father has been the chief for many years. He knows all the rules of the wasteland. He must have a reason for doing this." Lu Chen said, "Then what is the reason? Please tell me." Huayan was speechless. Lu Chen shrugged and said, "In any case, I'm not in a hurry. Do as you see fit." As he said this, he found a clean spot by the wall and sat down. Black Wolf Atsu, who had always been following him, also laid down beside him. Lu Chen stroked the fur on Atu's head and back, then quickly closed his eyes. Huayan stared at him for a while, then suddenly stamped his feet and went back to Huahu's residence. In the next 2 hours, many people of the Black Fire tribe heard the fiercest quarrel between the two of them in history. The quarrel was deafening and chaotic. This quarrel suddenly stopped at the last moment. Huayan seemed to have reached the limit of his patience. He strode out of the house and shouted at the people around him. Following which, a large group of tribal warriors arrived at Huayan's side almost instantaneously, surrounding him. On the other side, Fire Tiger also walked out. However, he looked much older than before. In fact, he looked even older than he was not long ago. This pair of father and son glared angrily at each other. A choice was immediately placed in the hands of all the people of the Black Fire tribe, especially in the hands of the fierce and valiant barbarian warriors. In the end, this quarrel did not really come to a conclusion. Because on that day, when the two of them confronted each other, everyone in the Black Fire tribe saw that almost every barbarian warrior spontaneously stood behind Huayan. And on Huahu's side, only his grandson, Huaying, rushed over and tightly supported his grandfather. Then, with a sad look in his eyes, he wanted to help his grandfather back. Huayan stood in the crowd with a similarly ugly expression. There was also a trace of sadness. But he quickly put aside these thoughts and walked to Lu Chen's side. Lu Chen was resting with his eyes closed, but in reality, he was not really asleep. So he quickly stood up and nodded to Huayan, saying, "You are probably the only one in the world who can confront the barbarian tribe's leader like this, right?" Huayan coldly snorted and said, "My father will no longer care about this sneak attack. However, we have already made an agreement. If you are unable to help me this time, then it is impossible for you to continue staying in the tribe." Lu Chen laughed, but his eyes revealed a trace of contempt. Then, he lightly said, "I have already told you, this battle is basically a sure win. But since I have agreed to help you make the Black Fire tribe strong, then there are some things that I have to do." "What is it?" Huayan asked. "Don't kill everyone like you did in the city." Lu Chen sighed, saying, "The number of barbarians in the north is already too little. If you want to achieve a faster result, then you naturally have to use some extreme methods." Chapter 314. What method? Huayan's eyes showed some doubt, looking at Lu Chen suspiciously. Lu Chen had no intention of hiding it from him. He beckoned Huayan to come to his side, and the two of them whispered for a while. Then Huayan's expression changed, looking unusually ugly. He shook his head, saying, "This won't do." Lu Chen asked, "Why?" Huayan said, "You are a human, so you don't understand the customs of the barbarians of the wilderness. No one has ever done this before." Lu Chen said lightly, "In the past, no tribe has ever been so weak, and still dreamed of restoring the glory of their ancestors, right?" Huayan was momentarily stunned, unable to speak for a moment. Lu Chen looked at him and said, "You asked me to help you, and I promised, I will do my best. Now that the Black Fire tribe is in such a situation, it will be very difficult to revive it. It is inevitable to use some rare methods and take a new path." Huayan still did not nod in agreement, only sitting next to Lu Chen with his back against the stone wall. From afar, people would occasionally glance at the two of them. One was a burly and fierce barbarian, and the other was a reserved, gloomy, and indifferent human. Their appearances were worlds apart, but for some reason, when the two sat together, there was a strange sense of harmony. After a while, Huayan said in a low voice, "Is there no other way?" Lu Chen said, "There are other ways, it's not that there aren't any." Huayan's spirit was immediately lifted, saying, "Let's hear it." Lu Chen said, "Then we'll follow the rules of the tribes in this wasteland. We'll quietly develop and have children. We'll take it 1 year at a time, one battle at a time. With my help, dealing with these small tribes shouldn't be a problem. We'll basically be able to defeat them. But the Black Fire tribe only has a small population. Even if you are given a large territory, you won't have anyone to guard it, right? So I think, in 30 to 50 years, when the tribe's population has increased, the Black Fire tribe will be able to control the northern border wilderness. And then? You still have the ambition to restore the glory of your ancestors when they were at their peak?" Lu Chen looked at Huyen and said calmly, "According to what you've told me, the territory in the south is 100 times larger than here, and the population of the most powerful tribes is almost 10 times that of the Black Fire tribe. Then what should we do? Let's continue to reproduce. We'll wait for about 100 or 200 years. If there are no natural or man-made disasters under the protection of the Fire God, and there are no attacks from other tribes, and everything is perfect without any mistakes, then when the population of the tribe increases and the number of warriors is enough to fight with those big tribes, maybe we can compete with them. But when that time comes, both of us won't be around anymore, right?" Lu Chen continued to describe the beautiful vision of the Black Fire tribe. Huyen was nodding his head slightly at first, but the more he listened, the uglier his expression became. When he heard the last few words, 100 or 200 years, his entire face darkened. Lu Chen smiled at him and said, "You're unhappy, aren't you? You're not willing, are you?" Then, he deliberately pointed at Huyen and said, "You see, although you're a barbarian and I'm a human, our thoughts are the same. You have the ambition, you want to make contributions, you want to become a hero of the Black Fire tribe. Why should you be a stepping stone for others? If that's the case, who will remember you? And even if you're willing, I won't do it." Lu Chen finally said calmly, "I plan to return to the north alive. If we really want to waste our time and die here, then we'll just turn against each other now." Deep into the night, dark clouds covered the stars. On the desolate plains, a group of people and horses quietly advanced under the cover of the night. Huyen and Lu Chen walked at the front of this group of ferocious barbarian warriors. Even further in front of them, in the deep darkness of the night, there was a group of black shadows moving silently in the night. 2 dark green lights flashed in the shadows. That was the Black Wolfatsu. Huyen looked at the abnormally agile shadow in front of him, his expression somewhat complicated in the darkness. After a while, he said to Lu Chen, "This monster of yours seems to be somewhat different." This time, Lu Chen's clothes were not the same as before. His original clothes were gone, and in its place was a completely black, ancient-looking black robe. Even half of his head was covered by a hood, looking a little strange. After hearing Huyen's words, he casually said, "HM? What's different?" Huyen shook his head and said, "It's too human-like. Ordinary demonic beasts are basically unable to do this. However, in the past, I've heard from the elders in the tribe that there seem to be similar strange demonic beasts in those large tribes." Lu Chen's eyes flashed, and he asked, "What kind of monsters are there in the big tribes?" Huyen thought for a while and said, "I can't say for sure, I've actually never seen it with my own eyes. But I heard that those especially powerful, especially human-like and intelligent monsters are usually under the command of the most powerful shaman venerable. Most people call them holy beasts." Lu Chen's footsteps slightly paused, then he said, "If only the Atsu was really a holy beast." Huyen laughed and said, "That's right." Lu Chen immediately changed the topic, pointing at the black robe he was wearing and said, "Must I wear this robe of yours?" Huyen immediately nodded and said, "Yes, this is the only priest robe that has been passed down from the ancestors of our Black Fire tribe. This is the tribe's rule." Rule. Lu Chen looked at him and said, "The matter that we talked about when we came out, have you thought about it?" Huyen was silent for a while, then said, "Yes, we'll do as you say. But before that, we have to at least win this battle. Lu Chen had a faint smile on his face, nodded and said, "Don't worry." Huo Yan also seemed to feel a little awkward, and after a dry cough, he said, "I feel that the Divine Wood Tribe's base was not damaged after the sneak attack, they should be on guard these days." Lu Chen said, "I also feel that they should be on guard. But so many days have passed, they can't be on guard every day, they will eventually relax a little. Moreover, we can win tonight's battle without a sneak attack." Huo Yan took a deep breath and said, "Why are you always so confident?" Lu Chen grinned and said, "Don't you believe that the fire god is protecting you?" I believe." Huo Yan was obviously stunned for a moment, and finally replied in a muffled voice. For this long-distance attack, the Black Fire tribe did not send out all their warriors, but those who were able to come out were all elite warriors who had experienced hundreds of battles. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they were the strongest fighting force of the Black Fire tribe so far. After experiencing the humiliation of being ambushed and having to flee in panic, these Black Fire warriors were all eager to fight. They did not have the slightest fear of entering deep into the Divine Wood tribe's lair. Instead, many people's gazes swept over the two figures at the front from time to time. When they looked at Huo Yan, their gazes were filled with respect and trust, but when they looked at Lu Chen, their gazes were complicated with a hint of suspicion. Before they set off, Lu Chen had already asked Huo Yan to gather these warriors together, and then he did some of the work that a tribal priest should do. It was just that he, a human, was playing tricks on them, and these Black Fire tribe warriors did not seem to feel any sense of security. At least, they did not feel the strong fighting spirit and power that the fire god was supposed to convey through the priest. This matter made everyone feel a little uneasy, but Lu Chen did not care. After all, he was just fooling around with these ferocious-looking but simple-minded people. He had no choice but to do this after Huo Yan strongly urged him to. According to Huo Yan, it was fine if there were no priests in the barbarian tribe, but as long as there were priests, they would definitely invite the priests to perform a big ceremony like going to war. Otherwise, the entire tribe would not feel at ease. But one of the consequences of this was that no one seemed to feel the legendary ancestral power. Logically speaking, when the legendary priest was around, shouldn't the ancestral power shine upon everyone? Or could it be that the human priest and the ancestors of the barbarian tribe were not on the same page, so the ancestors of the Black Fire tribe simply ignored this matter? Lu Chen was calm and collected, as if nothing had happened. The warriors of the Black Fire tribe looked at each other and did not dare to say anything. After all, that was the messenger of the fire god, the tribal priest. Moreover, the Black Fire tribe had lost their priest for hundreds of years, and no one was particularly clear about the specific situation back then. What if they were wrong? In short, such a group of people came out in such a muddle-headed manner. Although they were a little uneasy, their fighting spirit was still high as they charged towards the old lair of the Divine Wood tribe. They did not know how long they had advanced like this, until the figure of Atsu, who had merged with the darkness, suddenly stopped and let out a few low howls. Only then did the Black Fire tribe's troops suddenly stop. In the distance ahead, a camp appeared under the sky. The houses were faintly discernible, and there were some torches burning in the darkness, emitting light. They should be the warriors of the Divine Wood tribe who were on night watch. Huo Yan turned his head to look at Lu Chen, and then waved his hands to both sides. After a moment, all the warriors of the Black Fire tribe behind them quietly spread out, forming a long line, quietly lurking in the night, and then pulled out their respective blades. The night was silent, and the murderous aura condensed like frost, as if it could chill one's heart. Lu Chen, on the other hand, looked at the shadow of the tribe in the distance and took a deep breath. After a moment, a black shadow walked to Lu Chen's side. It was Atsu, who had appeared like a ghost. Its green eyes seemed to have sensed something, and revealed a rare cold and bloodthirsty emotion. Under the black robe, Lu Chen slowly stretched out his arm, and an invisible wave of air suddenly appeared in front of his chest. After a moment, the Vulcan staff appeared in his hand. He held the staff, moved forward, and pointed at the camp of the Divine Wood tribe. At that moment, a wind suddenly blew over the wilderness. The cold wind blew, as if a demon that had been sleeping for many years had finally awakened. In the dark sky, it stared at the creatures below, revealing a ferocious and silent grin. Chapter 3:15. As one of the 5 largest tribes in the north of the wilderness, the Divine Wood tribe actually had a larger population than the Black Fire tribe. Therefore, the scale of their camp was slightly larger than that of the Black Fire tribe. In fact, among the 5 northern tribes, the Mountain Spirit tribe and the Thunder Lizard tribe had the largest population, while the Divine Wood tribe ranked 3rd. As for the Black Fire tribe, they ranked 4th, and there was not much difference between them and the Ghost Fox tribe. However, despite their small population, the Black Fire tribe's combat power had long been considered to be above that of the Divine Wood tribe. It was second only to the Mountain Spirit tribe and the Thunder Lizard tribe. From this, it could be seen that the warriors of the Black Fire tribe were actually quite fierce. It was precisely because of this that the Divine Wood tribe's surprise attack had caught the Black Fire tribe unprepared and made many warriors of the Black Fire tribe feel humiliated. That night, the cold night wind swept across the land of the wilderness, blowing all the way to the camp of the Divine Wood tribe. The burning torches swayed in the wind and danced in a somewhat frenzied manner, emitting flickering afterimages in the darkness like twisting and convulsing snakes. The warriors on night watch were a little tired and shrank their bodies in the cold wind. Even the strong barbarians would feel uncomfortable in the cold night of the wilderness. Until the sound of the wind suddenly grew louder, suddenly turning into a sharp whistling sound in the pitch-black, ice-cold night. The warriors guarding the gate of the Divine Wood tribe suddenly raised their heads and looked forward. But before they could react, the shrill, ear-piercing shriek had already cut through the deathly silence of the night and arrived before their eyes. It was as if a light had suddenly lit up in the darkness. It was the sinister grin of a death god, revealing its sharp fangs that glowed with white light. Terrifying sharp blades rushed over, and in the next instant, there was a muffled sound that made one's entire body tremble. A Divine Wood warrior's body was directly sent flying, and on his body, a giant axe had directly chopped into his face. Blood splattered, and the unlucky guy was almost split in half. The warriors of the Divine Wood tribe on both sides turned pale with fright. They immediately roared in anger, but their anger was soon covered by even more vigorous and ferocious shouts. In the darkness of the night, a row of tall and ferocious warriors charged out. Perhaps there weren't that many of them, but in the darkness, they were like raging waves rolling up a violent wave. Amidst the blood-boiling roars, in the bone-chilling cold wind, they crashed down. The leader was the most muscular and powerful Huoyan. Like a raging wave, this group of black flame warriors instantly swept over and rushed to the entrance of the Divine Wood tribe. Huoyan laughed sinisterly as he pulled out the giant axe from the corpse. Cries of alarm and screams rose and fell in the surroundings. Blood splashed and a few more corpses appeared on the ground. In the camp of the Divine Wood tribe further away, the alarm had already resounded throughout the entire camp. No matter what, the Divine Wood tribe was a barbarian tribe that lived in the harsh northern wastelands. Those who could survive in such a place were not weaklings. Therefore, in a short period of time visible to the naked eye, torches were quickly lit in the Divine Wood tribe despite being ambushed. Then, more and more barbarian warriors swarmed over. Some were holding weapons, while others were not even dressed properly. It was obvious that they had just woken up from their sleep. But at a glance, everyone's faces were filled with anger and ferocity. Perhaps there was panic, but not much fear. The valiant nature of the barbarians could be said to be completely revealed. "It's the people of the Black Flame tribe." An angry roar came from the crowd. It was obvious that someone from the Divine Wood tribe had already recognized the identity of the invading enemy. This roar caused a commotion, but more warriors continued to roar and charge over. Looking at the number of people, the people from the Divine Wood tribe were much more than the warriors from the Black Fire tribe. After all, this was their nest. But from Huayan onwards, none of the warriors from the Black Fire tribe showed any signs of fear. Instead, they continued to roar and charge forward. Although they had fewer people, they seemed to erupt with an aura that was not any weaker than the opposite side. Seeing that a bloody battle was about to unfold in this harsh and calamitous wasteland, a black figure slowly stepped out from the shadows behind the Black Fire tribe warriors. It was as if he had become one with the darkness. It had been like this since the beginning of time, to the point that the fire god's staff in his hand had even overshadowed his existence. It emitted a strange light in mid-air, and then, the twisted totem carving slowly lit up. In the darkness, he began to chant a mysterious incantation in a low voice. The ancient aura descended from the night sky, like a god or a devil, staring at the crowd. As if there was a response, in the crowd, Huayan's body suddenly stopped, and then he raised his head towards the sky and roared. His voice was so shrill and loud that no matter if it was friend or foe, everyone was shocked and looked towards him. The tall and sturdy barbarian with the huge axe in his hand suddenly faced upwards and roared. Then, a strange rune suddenly lit up in the middle of his forehead. It flickered with a strange radiance. A moment later, a black flame suddenly rose from the center of the rune with a whoosh. It seemed as if a demon was roaring at the world. Ka 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 ka. A strange sound that caused one's scalp to turn numb rang out from Huayan's body. Under the madly dancing black flames, the originally ferocious and wild barbarian's entire body suddenly expanded. All of his muscles seemed to have exploded and swelled to more than double their original size. Green veins popped out, making him look like a barbarian giant that no one had ever seen before. His face that had become especially ferocious also looked like a demon at this moment. His eyes flickered with a bloodthirsty light, and the only feeling he had was power. Incomparably powerful power. He roared at the sky, as if there was nothing in this world that could stop him. Then, he roared and rushed forward. The darkness and the night wind all retreated, revealing the Divine Wood tribe members who had a look of shock on their faces. Witchcraft. A sharp and fearful voice suddenly rang out from the crowd of the God Wood tribe. They were not afraid of blood, sharp blades, or even death. However, it was as if all of them were innately awed by the legendary and mysterious witchcraft. Even their voices trembled as they screamed. On the other hand, the Black Fire tribe was full of fighting spirit. Many warriors even turned around to look. Then, they, including the people of the Divine Wood tribe who had also sensed something, saw a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. A black shadow floated in the air behind them. Darkness gathered from all directions, so dense that it was almost unimaginable, and wrapped around the shadow-like person. A brilliant light flickered in the darkness, and in the center of the light was a staff. The totem rune shone with a dazzling light. Then, in that instant, the entire staff suddenly shot out an indescribably huge black flame. The black flame burned the sky, as if it was going to burn the night. At the same time, when the black flame shot out, the warriors of the Black Fire tribe on the ground all trembled, and then they roared in anger. Then, the strange phenomenon that happened to Huayan also happened to them. Under the night sky, the warriors of the Black Fire tribe all seemed to have turned into ferocious and terrifying demons. Strange totem runes flickered on their foreheads, and black flames spewed out of their mouths. Then, they sneered and roared as they rushed into the crowd of Divine Wood tribe. Bright red blood seemed to be the main color of the night from the beginning. When the dripping blood spurted out from the body, it was accompanied by terrifying screams and crazed roars filled with killing intent. Not only did the bodies of the Black Fire warriors become larger after being strengthened by the strange Black Fire witchcraft, their strength also skyrocketed. Many of them had clearly not experienced this before, and many of them were not familiar with this feeling, so they were not very proficient in their movements. However, this didn't affect the outcome of the battle at all. Apart from their strength, their bodies were also several times tougher than before under the blessing of the black flames. Although the barbarian warriors of the Divine Wood tribe were greatly frightened, they still bravely rushed forward, and fought with the black fire warriors that looked like ferocious beasts. But very quickly, they discovered that most of their weapons were unable to cause any damage to the black fire warriors, while the beastified or demonized black fire warriors could easily kill their opponents. Some of the berserk warriors even threw away their weapons and used their bare hands to tear apart the barbarian warriors that they were fighting. From the beginning of the battle, especially after the black fire witchcraft was cast, it suddenly became a one-sided massacre. There were still people in the Divine Wood tribe who were stubbornly resisting, but they were still forced to retreat. But at this moment, someone shouted from the crowd, hold on a little longer. This witchcraft can't last for too long." The warriors of the Divine Wood tribe who were resisting with their lives seemed to have their spirits lifted, as if they had seen a life-saving straw. They resisted with all their might, while the black fire warriors that were attacking and slaughtering did not react at all. Perhaps only the strongest and most ferocious of them, Huiyan, looked back after smashing an enemy in front of him to death with a roar. That dark shadow was still floating in the dark night sky, hidden in the darkness. No one could see his face or figure clearly. But amidst that strange and terrifying aura, a dark shadow slowly extended from the sky. Gradually, it swept past like a dark cloud, covering a large part of the Divine Wood tribe's camp. The light gradually dissipated, and a cold gaze looked down from the clouds. In the depths of those eyes, there were dark flames burning fiercely. In the darkness, he stretched out his hand and pointed at the crowd below. Thus, a cold wind blew, and the wind and clouds swirled. Dark demons swept through the sky, whistling down. Chapter 3:16. Fire was the source of light in the world. It was something that illuminated the darkness. It was warmth, hope, and the beginning of all living things. Even when the flame was burning, it was still warm, bright, and scorching. And if one day, the flame turned black, no longer bright, no longer warm, and even cold, what would happen? On this day, the barbarians of the Divine Wood tribe in the northern wilderness saw the result. Darkness engulfed the sky and the earth, pressing down heavily. It surrounded the entire tribe's campsite with the aura of a legendary demon. Then, in the mournful whistling of the night wind, in the depths of the endless darkness, in the shadows that seemed to have solidified, there was suddenly something strange twisting and shaking. Then, it slowly took shape from the darkness, twisting and stepping out. It was a monster that was completely black. It was neither a ferocious demon beast nor was it a stone puppet. It looked to be several dozen meters tall and could barely be considered a human. However, it had 4 heads and 8 arms. Each face was different, but all of them were ferocious and ferocious, like an evil spirit. Once the strange demon stepped out of the darkness, the entire Divine Wood tribe camp immediately fell into a solemn and deathly silence. Not only did the people of the Divine Wood tribe retreat in fear, even the witchcraft demonized warriors of the Black Fire tribe were shocked. Only Huiyan, who was in the crowd, suddenly had a flash of ecstasy in his eyes after his body trembled. Compared to the other tribal warriors, he had been raised as the successor of the tribe since he was a child. Naturally, he knew more about the history and matters of the Black Fire tribe. The terrifying monster in front of him was a terrifying monster that was summoned by the incomparably powerful shaman during the most powerful era of the Black Fire tribe thousands of years ago. It was called the Shadow Devil. The nature of the Shadow Devil was actually similar to the stone puppet that the Mountain Spirit tribe's shaman had summoned, but in terms of combat power and ferocity, it was far superior to the stone puppet. It was one of the most terrifying creatures summoned by witchcraft in the history of the southern wilderness. Huiyan had never thought that a human like Lu Chen, who seemed to have just received the inheritance of the fire god, and whose cultivation and strength were not too strong, would be able to suddenly summon such a powerful shadow devil. It was no wonder that this human man was so unbelievably confident before the battle began. Thinking of this, Huyen felt the blood in his body boil, as if in that instant, he really saw the hope of reviving his tribe. He fiercely turned around and roared at the enemies in front of him. Waving his giant axe, he charged forward, killing everything in his path. This immediately alerted the surrounding comrades. The warriors of the Black Fire tribe roared out in anger and started killing. Immediately, blood flowed like a river, turning the Divine Wood tribe's camp into a terrifying purgatory. At the same time, when everyone's attention was attracted by the shadow demon, the black shadow in the sky silently descended and landed on the ground outside the Divine Wood tribe's camp. In the darkness, as soon as Lu Chen's feet touched the ground, he suddenly felt his legs go soft. He staggered forward and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, at this time, a black shadow suddenly sprang out from the darkness. It was the black wolf Atsu, who directly used its back to support Lu Chen. The Vulcan staff fell on the yellow ground with a "pa" sound. Lu Chen lay on Atsu's body, his face pale as he gasped for breath. After a while, he seemed to be able to catch his breath and let out a long sigh. Atsu looked back at Lu Chen worriedly and called out in a low voice. Lu Chen forced a smile at it, then sat on the ground. After panting a few more times, he opened his mouth and said, "This damned witchcraft, I don't know where it came from. Even a slightly more powerful witchcraft seems to take my life." Atsu's huge head leaned over and rubbed against Lu Chen's chest, but it didn't seem to know what to do. After a while, it lay down beside Lu Chen. Lu Chen looked at the black wolf with a trace of warmth in his eyes. He reached out and gently patted its head, then raised his head to look at the battlefield below. After the terrifying shadow demon joined the battlefield, the Divine Wood tribe's desperate resistance instantly collapsed. Almost no one could resist this terrifying demon, especially when a few of the bravest and strongest Divine Wood tribe warriors rushed forward but were caught by a single palm. Then, they were torn apart and killed in front of everyone. All the Divine Wood tribe barbarians seemed to have completely collapsed. No one dared to resist anymore. Everyone was fleeing in fear. The outcome of this battle was completely determined, and it was only a matter of time before it ended. Lu Chen retracted his gaze. Taking advantage of the fact that there was no one around, he casually leaned on Atsu's back and muttered. Then, he said in a low voice, "How is this a fire god? It's obviously a death god." The Black Fire tribe's surprise attack on the Divine Wood tribe was a complete victory during the night. However, the final battle only ended at daybreak. There weren't many battles in the later stages. Instead, it was more about the Divine Wood tribe that were almost driven mad by fear. The shadow demon disappeared not long after the outcome of the battle was decided. To be honest, this terrifying demon actually didn't kill too many people. However, its terrifying power was unparalleled, and it was a decisive force that influenced the outcome of the battle. At daybreak, the Black Fire tribe barbarian warriors led by Huyen were no longer in a state of enchantment. All of them returned to their normal appearances. But even so, the completely defeated Divine Wood tribe could no longer put up any resistance. Unlike the sneak attack on the Black Fire tribe, the Divine Wood tribe suffered a heavy blow this time. The tribe's camp was in a mess. Blood flowed like a river, and corpses and broken limbs could be seen everywhere. Among the survivors, not many managed to escape. In fact, most of the surviving Divine Wood tribe members were intercepted by the warriors of the Black Fire tribe. When the first ray of sunlight fell from the sky, the remaining barbarians of the Divine Wood tribe were gathered in a corner of the camp. Around them were ferocious-looking barbarian warriors of the Black Fire tribe. Their eyes were ferocious, and the blades and axes in their hands were still wet with blood. A little further away was the land of carnage. Who knew how many lives had been lost there? The originally thriving tribe's camp was now in ruins. Houses and walls had collapsed, and many places still had traces of being burnt. The morning breeze carried a strong smell of blood that made people want to vomit. In the sky above the tribe's camp, there were already a few vultures and a large flock of crows circling in the air, cawing as they smelled the blood. It was in such a hellish scene that Lu Chen, who was wearing a black robe with his face hidden in a deep hood, slowly walked into the already fallen tribe's camp with the huge black wolf Atsu by his side. The black robe seemed to block out all the light. Even though it was daytime, no one could see the face of this human male clearly. But Atsu, who stood beside him, attracted everyone's attention. That ferocious beast's appearance was a perfect foil to this terrifying shaman's aura. There was no longer any doubt in the eyes of the warriors of the Black Fire tribe. Everyone, even the most ferocious and valiant warriors, were filled with reverence in front of this black-robed priest. They respectfully made way for him. Lu Chen silently walked forward, calmly treating all the reverence and fear in the surroundings. Under his feet, he crossed the river of blood. Then, he left bloody footprints on the road, all the way to the Divine Wood tribe's captives. "Priest, it's the priest," terrified, soft voices came from the captives. There were many women, children, and elderly among the captives of the Godwood tribe, as well as many adult men. Even the patriarch of the Godwood tribe was not dead yet. He had only lost an arm, and as a form of treatment that was different from the other tribesmen, he was tied with an extra rope and thrown in front of the crowd in a rough manner. At this moment, he stared at the black-robed priest with his eyes wide open. His face was filled with disbelief. But whether it was Lu Chen or the other warriors of the Black Fire tribe, no one paid attention to him. Huayan stood in front of the crowd and watched as Lu Chen walked over. Then, he strode forward, stretched out his hands, and grasped Lu Chen's arm. Then, he nodded heavily. "We won," he said. "We won this battle." Lu Chen raised his head slightly and smiled in the shadow of the black hood. Then, he said in a low voice, "Didn't I tell you before? We will win. Let's begin." The black-robed Lu Chen said to Huayan. The people standing closest to Huayan were his two most trusted warriors. One was Iron Bear, and the other was Black Bull. At this moment, they turned to look at Huayan. They did not seem to understand what Lu Chen meant. But after this battle, even such powerful warriors like them were filled with reverence for Lu Chen. Huayan hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "I still think it's very difficult. We barbarians would rather die than betray our ancestors." Beside him, Iron Bear and Black Yak were immediately moved. They wore astonished expressions. Lu Chen's hood moved slightly, but he didn't seem to mind. He only said casually, "Let's try." "All right." Huayan seemed to have finally made up his mind. He turned and walked towards the captives of the Divine Wood tribe. On the other hand, Lu Chen turned around, as if he wasn't interested in what was going to happen next. Instead, after his gaze swept across the bloody and messy battlefield, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise, as if he had discovered something. Then, he walked towards the center of the tribe's camp not far away. There was a stone altar that looked like it was used to worship the tribe's ancestors. At this moment, most of it had been destroyed. But in the pile of rubble, where fresh blood had been splattered, Lu Chen's gaze fell on something. It was a white bone mask that looked broken and ancient. At the same time, Huayan's voice came from behind him. It was steady and loud, echoing in the sky above the tribe. "Now, you have two choices. Chapter 317. The white bone mask in Lu Chen's hand wasn't the skull of a human. Although the barbarians worshipped their ancestors, it was common for them to preserve the remains of their ancestors and worship them. However, the thing in Lu Chen's hand had two horns, and the shape of its face was completely different from that of a barbarian. It seemed more like an unknown demon beast. Something that could be enshrined on the altar in the middle of a tribe's camp could be considered rather important to a barbarian tribe. However, Lu Chen couldn't tell the origin of this white bone mask. When he held it in his hand, it didn't feel rough at all. Instead, he felt a warm radiance from the tip of his finger. It seemed that after a long period of time, the material of the white bone mask had quietly changed. It was now almost like jade. Even though the shape of the mask was still a little scary, Lu Qin could no longer feel the dense aura of death from it. He played with the white bone mask for a while, then held it in his hand and walked back. At the same time, Huiyan's voice was still echoing, and it quickly caused an uproar among the captives of the Divine Wood tribe. Huiyan explained his intentions very simply to everyone. He gave them two choices: 1. Give up your original worship, throw away everything, and join the Black Fire tribe, becoming a part of the Black Fire tribe. The second choice was death. Of course, this was the idea that Lu Qin had proposed to Huiyan, and he had tried his best to convince him to carry it out. However, even though Huiyan trusted Lu Qin, he was still very skeptical of this idea. And it wasn't just Huiyan. Even the barbarian warriors like Iron Bear and Black Bull all shook their heads when they heard of this idea. To a barbarian tribe, there was nothing more important than the gods and ancestors they worshipped. To overthrow all of this and make them submit to a tribe might be even more difficult than killing them. Huiyan and the others did not believe that this method would succeed, but Lu Qin insisted on trying. As for the reason, the others did not know, and probably only Huiyan knew. What Lu Qin wanted was to use the fastest, fiercest, and most direct method to increase the strength of the Black Fire tribe. The biggest problem in front of them was that the population of the Black Fire tribe was too small. If they wanted to return to the peak of their power, they would need to increase their population by at least 10 times. Lu Qin did not have the patience to wait, and Huiyan did not want to wait any longer. However, the reality was the reality. When Huiyan told all the barbarians of the Divine Wood tribe about this, there was a moment of astonishment and silence. Then, a loud clamor broke out. It was unknown how many barbarians were cursing and swearing. Their expressions were agitated as if they wanted to rush over and tear this enemy who had slandered their ancestors into pieces. And in front of the crowd, the chief of the Divine Wood tribe roared angrily. With unknown strength, he actually jumped up from the ground, as if he wanted to rush over and die with Huiyan. But before he could get close, he was kicked away by the tall and burly Tai Xiong, who was standing next to Huiyan, with a sneer. Bang! The chief of the Divine Wood tribe rolled a few times on the ground like a gourd, his face covered in dirt for a moment. Many Divine Wood barbarians in the crowd looked agitated, and jumped up one after another, wanting to fight with their lives on the line. But the warriors of the Black Fire tribe standing at the side immediately suppressed them. Shouts, curses, and sounds of suppression filled the air. In the middle of the crowd, there were people who pulled out their swords and slashed a few times, causing blood to appear. After a while, the group of restless barbarians were finally suppressed. Although Huiyan had already expected this situation, he still felt somewhat embarrassed. The veins on his forehead were throbbing, and he wished he could directly raise his sword and hack a few of them to death. But at this moment, a hand suddenly stretched out from the side and pulled him back. Huiyan turned around and saw the black-robed Lu Qin walking to his side. "Don't worry." Lu Qin's voice sounded very calm. Huiyan snorted and said, "You have also seen the situation, what should we do now?" Lu Qin lightly said, "Let me do it." He took a step forward, his eyes sweeping across the crowd in front of him. For a moment, almost everyone's eyes fell on him. Many of the Divine Wood tribe's captives looked at the black-robed priest with eyes full of hatred and fear. After a moment, Lu Qin opened his mouth and said, "Drag out all the children and women under the age of 8. As soon as these words came out, there was a sudden silence. After a moment, the Divine Wood tribe was filled with curses, while the warriors of the Black Fire tribe looked at each other in dismay. Many people's eyes uniformly looked at Huiyan, who was standing beside Lu Qin. Lu Qin slightly turned around, also looking at Huiyan. Huiyan hesitated for a moment, then suddenly clenched his teeth and said in a deep voice, "Listen to the priest." As soon as he gave the order, dozens of warriors of the Black Fire tribe rushed into the crowd like wolves and tigers, grabbing, pulling, dragging, and pulling. The Divine Wood tribe's crowd was immediately filled with cries and screams. There was no lack of people who fought with their lives on the line, but under the powerful strength of the Black Fire tribe, the result of this resistance was just a few more corpses on the ground. Then, Lu Chen's order was completely carried out. About half of the women and children in the crowd were captured and alone on the other side of the field. These people with the weakest battle strength looked to be shivering with fear on their faces. No one knew what the terrifying black-robed demon was going to do next. But Lu Chen did not let them wait for too long. He quickly made everyone understand his thoughts. These women and children, whether you like it or not, will become a part of the Black Fire tribe. Lu Chen's cold and calm voice reverberated in the camp. Apart from that, there was no other sound. At this moment, even the air seemed to be filled with a sense of coldness and killing intent. If there are men in the family, let them come and claim them. If no one wants to claim them, then directly distribute them to the Black Fire warriors today. Let them go back and serve the Black Fire warriors and give birth to their children. As soon as these words came out, the faces of the Divine Wood tribe on both sides changed, while the warriors of the Black Fire tribe were overjoyed. Many of them laughed out loud. In the southern wilderness, due to the harsh living conditions, murder and looting were not uncommon. Women and children who had lost their protection were indeed often robbed. But it could be said that it was the first time in many years that Lu Chen planned to directly divide up such a large group of women after the war. While the Black Fire tribe warriors were excited, the Divine Wood tribe naturally looked as if they had lost their parents. Many women and children cried out. However, Lu Chen did not care about this. It seemed that his heart was much colder and harder than these barbaric barbarians. Then, Lu Chen directly pointed to the Divine Wood tribe's patriarch who was lying on the ground. His face was covered in blood. He said, "You are the patriarch. Come and identify them first." The Divine Wood patriarch's body swayed, and he looked like he was about to start cursing again. Lu Chen said coldly, "If you don't come over to claim them, you'll be given to my warriors as slaves." The Divine Wood tribe's patriarch gnashed his teeth, but in the end, he had no choice but to climb up. Then, under the sorrowful and indignant gazes of everyone, he staggered to the front of the group of women and children and began to claim his own women and children. In this wasteland, the primitive barbarians respected strength, and it was extremely common for men to be superior to women. As the patriarch of the tribe, the Divine Wood tribe's patriarch had actually pointed out 7 women and 2 children. Clearly, he had lived a very comfortable life in the past. The Black Fire tribe's barbarian warriors who were watching with great interest seemed to be filled with jealousy and hatred. A few of them even began to curse, clearly feeling very unbalanced. The Divine Wood tribe's patriarch knew that the situation was not in his favor, so he did not care. He lowered his head and planned to lead his people back. But at this moment, suddenly, a black figure blocked in front of him. It was that mysterious, terrifying, cold, and ruthless black-robed priest. "Wait a moment," Lu Chen said calmly. The Divine Wood tribe's camp was instantly silent. Everyone looked over, at Lu Chen. The original Vulcan staff had already disappeared. At this moment, the only thing in his hand was the white bone mask that he had casually grabbed. His entire body was hidden in the seemingly ancient black robe, which made him look even colder. After a moment, the Divine Wood tribe's patriarch seemed to have plucked up his courage and asked, "What do you want?" "Our warrior leader has spoken just now," said Yi Zichen. Lu Chen's hood moved slightly, then he looked up at the barbarian in front of him and said, "Join the Black Fire, or die. Choose one." The Divine Wood tribe's patriarch's face twisted, but even if he did not turn his head to look, he knew that all his tribesmen were looking at him. He clenched his teeth and suddenly roared, "Impossible, you must be dreaming." Lu Chen looked at him coldly, his fingers moving slightly, and the white bone mask flipped in his palm, emitting a strange white light. After a moment, Lu Chen suddenly picked up the mask and silently and slowly placed it on his face. At the same time, he said lightly, "Okay." The white bone mask slowly descended on the human man's face. Strangely, the mask instantly and firmly attached to his face, without any signs of slipping off. All the clansmen of the Divine Wood tribe were in an uproar. But very quickly, they saw a pair of dark eyes appear behind the terrifying bone mask. Two black flames burned behind the terrifying eye sockets, like the eyes of a demon, and fell on the Divine Wood tribe's patriarch. "In that case, you can die." The Divine Wood tribe's patriarch was first shocked, then angry. Just as he was about to resist, his expression suddenly changed. He grabbed his throat with both hands and shouted hoarsely. A ball of black flames suddenly spewed out from his mouth. Then, it grew 10 times larger as it faced the wind and directly engulfed his entire body. In an instant, a shrill and miserable howl resounded through the entire camp. Chapter 318. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the black flames engulfed the chief of the Divine Wood tribe. But just like what the black flames had shown in the past, it did not harm the flesh and blood of the human body. Everyone could also see that the chief's body did not suffer any obvious injuries. His flesh and skin were almost completely unharmed in the black flames, as if nothing had happened. However, even though the patriarch of the Divine Wood tribe was unscathed in the black flames, he seemed to have suffered the most terrifying pain in the world. He howled, roared, and cried, throwing the toughness of blood that all barbarians valued the most to the back of his mind. It was as if the pain he was suffering had completely destroyed his will. In the end, he could not even stand. He fell to the ground, rolling and struggling in pain. In his despair, he even began to beg the terrifying black-robed priest for mercy. However, Lu Chen just stood there, silent and motionless. The black robe covered his figure, and the bone mask covered his face. Everyone could only see his deep, dark eyes and the burning black flames. Just like that, under everyone's shocked and incredulous gazes, the Divine Wood patriarch slowly died under the condition that his flesh, skin, and clothes weren't burned. His body was extremely twisted, and there were many wounds on his body. But everyone could clearly see that those wounds had been caused by the chief's own clawing. Just what kind of terrifying pain could make a barbarian fall into such a state of despair? When the final howls gradually faded, the air was filled with a frozen coldness. Almost everyone's eyes were filled with fear, including the warriors of the Black Fire tribe standing at the side. No one would question the identity of the black-robed priest anymore. This terrifying, cruel, vicious, suffocating, and mysterious method was the most revered witchcraft in the southern wilderness for thousands of years. When the black flames dissipated, Lu Chen's eyes behind the bone mask once again looked at the twisted corpse on the ground. His pupils seemed to contract slightly, as if he had recalled the painful memories that had haunted him for many years. Next. A cold and calm voice came from behind the bone mask, echoing in the camp. Two warriors of the Black Fire tribe rushed forward and dragged out a barbarian man from the Divine Wood tribe, throwing him in front of Lu Chen. When the barbarian raised his head, he felt a shadow looming over him. The black-robed priest appeared not too far away from him. It was as if the priest had blocked all the light, making the barbarian feel as if the entire world was dark. A hoarse voice came out of the barbarian's mouth. No one could understand what he was saying, or perhaps he didn't say anything at all. However, before he could take another step forward, Lu Chen suddenly said, "Wait." Then, he turned around and looked at the corpse. He pointed at the woman and child that had been claimed by the dead chief of the Divine Wood tribe and said coldly, "Take these people to the side and distribute them to the warriors of the tribe when we get back." The barbarian warriors of the Black Fire tribe immediately burst into laughter, while the people of the Divine Wood tribe were filled with grief and despair. But this did not change anything. Amidst the cries of the women, they were brought to the other side. Then, Lu Chen turned around and looked at the barbarian and said, "It's your turn. Go and identify them." The barbarian's body trembled, as if he could no longer move. Lu Chen said indifferently, "If you recognize them, there's still hope to save them. If you don't, they will definitely be taken away." The barbarian's face was ashen, as if he had lost all his life. But in the end, he still went to the group of women and claimed a woman and a child that was still in swaddling clothes. The child seemed to have been born not long ago. It was a small ball wrapped in a piece of animal skin. It was held in the arms of the woman who was also trembling and crying. For some reason, when Lu Chen saw the crying tears of the barbarian woman and the child, his heart suddenly palpitated. For a moment, he could clearly feel that somewhere in the depths of his heart seemed to soften. After a moment, he turned around and looked at the barbarian man. "It's your turn to choose. There are two paths, which one will you choose?" The man's gaze stayed on his wife and child. His face was full of pain and struggle. Anyone could see the hesitation on his face, but he did not really give up. Instead, a trace of determination gradually appeared on his face, as if he was about to make a decision. But at this time, Lu Chen suddenly said, "You should know that no matter what, after today, there will no longer be a divine wood tribe in this world." The barbarian man's body trembled, and the other divine wood tribe members in the distance were also in an uproar. Lu Chen did not care about this at all. He just said indifferently, "Those who are willing to surrender, swear to join the Black Fire tribe and protect your family and children. Those who are not willing to surrender, I will kill them." Without the divine wood tribe, why do you still worship the gods and ancestors? Or are you willing to watch your wife give birth to someone else's child and become a slave for your own child? As he said this, he pointed at the relatives and children of the divine wood tribe's chief. The barbarian man's expression was extremely ugly. The determination on his face disappeared, and his expression changed rapidly. He looked as if he was about to collapse. Suddenly, as if in despair, he roared and shouted at Lu Chen, "Even if I surrender, how can you guarantee that the people of the Black Fire tribe won't come to steal my women?" Lu Chen took a step forward and pointed to the sky without hesitation. He said in a clear voice, "I swear to the fire god worshipped by the Black Fire tribe and to the ancestors that as long as you swear to be loyal to me and join the Black Fire tribe, I will treat you equally. If there is any conflict, I will deal with it fairly. If not, let the heavens send down divine punishment and destroy the Black Fire tribe." This oath was said resolutely and without hesitation. The content of this oath was the most important among the barbarian tribes of the wilderness. It could be said to be impeccable. With Lu Chen's words, the expressions of many people of the divine wood tribe changed subtly. But on the other side, on the side of the warriors of the Black Fire tribe, Huiyan's facial muscles twitched slightly. He stared at the black-robed priest and seemed to grit his teeth. Struggle and hesitation were rare emotions for a barbarian, especially when it involved such a major matter that could overturn the previous half of their lives. Most people would be at a loss. But on this day, when the barbarian man was the first to cry and say that he was willing to surrender to his wife and children, full of shame and despair, the whole camp of the divine wood tribe was filled with a cold and dead atmosphere. Even the warriors of the Black Fire tribe had a very ugly expression on their faces. In this wasteland, no one had ever heard of anyone forcing a barbarian to betray his ancestors and beliefs. That kind of pain and despair could be felt by every barbarian, whether it was the barbarians from the divine wood tribe or the barbarians from the Black Fire tribe. Their gazes were either filled with hatred, fear, or reverence as they stared at the black-robed priest. The white bone mask made the man look so terrifying and strange. What happened next became numb and cruel. They had to choose between two paths. There was no other possibility, and the price was the barbarians' lives and the fate of their families. The southern wilderness had been a harsh place for survival for a long time. But on this day, the barbarians in the camp, whether they were from the divine wood tribe or the Black Fire tribe, seemed to have come to a new understanding of this fact. Some people surrendered in despair for their own lives and the fate of their families. They abandoned their ancestors, turned their backs on their gods, and swore an oath to join the Black Fire tribe. There were also some divine wood barbarians who were unyielding and would rather die than surrender. What awaited them was the purgatory of the Black Fire tribe, and the scene of their women and children being carved up as slaves in front of everyone, scene after scene, cold, cruel, and suffocating, played out until the end. In the evening of that day, the warriors of the Black Fire tribe left with a large group of people and set foot on the road back to the city. Many people in the crowd carried big and small bags on their backs, their faces filled with sorrow and pain. Behind them, a fire slowly rose to the sky. The once prosperous Divine Wood tribe camp was engulfed in flames, and the name of the Divine Wood tribe, after this night, forever disappeared in the night of the southern wilderness. In front of the night, there were stars, dark clouds, and even more, deep and boundless darkness, shrouding the vast land of the wilderness. Chapter 319. Thousands of years had passed in the southern wilderness. Countless tribes rose and fell, and countless people lived and died. The only thing that never changed was the desolate land and the endless wind and sand. Too much time had passed, and one's vision was too far away. It would make people numb. The tribes that had perished and the people that had died would no longer have the power to move people. They would be submerged in the long river of time, buried in the dust of history, and easily forgotten by most people. Even if some people remembered them, or saw bits and pieces of them from some ancient books, they would just turn the page with an indifferent face. Huayan was the most outstanding barbarian in the Black Fire tribe for many years. Not only did he have a strong body and fierce fighting power, but he also had vision and decisiveness that almost no one else in the tribe had. Perhaps it was because of this that he had never been willing to be ordinary. He did not want to be suppressed in the harsh and barren north of the wilderness, and spent his life fighting with the other 4 tribes. He knew and remembered the glory of the ancient ancestors of the Black Fire tribe. Ever since he was a child, his biggest dream was to restore his tribe to its former glory. At the same time, he would engrave his name in the history of the tribe as the hero of the revival of the tribe. He would be remembered, praised, and spread by thousands of generations of descendants. It was also for the same reason that he had never thought that he would become a stepping stone, that he would silently dedicate his life to benefit his descendants, and that he would accumulate his strength. The success he wanted was right now, right in this life. Unfortunately, Huayan himself did not possess that kind of powerful power. That was the most powerful and supreme power in the southern wilderness, witchcraft. Therefore, when he suddenly saw the black fire on Lu Chen's body that day, this barbarian resolutely and inconceivably made the biggest gamble of his life in that short period of time. He desperately dragged a human man onto the pirate ship of the Black Fire tribe, and then pinned the hope of the tribe's revival on him. For this, he piously prayed to the god of fire. Just like in the past, the god of fire remained silent and did not respond. For thousands of years, the privilege of communicating with the god of fire only belonged to shamans and priests who had the power of witchcraft. Huayan did not know what the god of fire thought of his decision, but he could see that the Black Fire tribe had destroyed the Divine Wood tribe, which used to be on an equal footing with them, in one night. This was a glorious victory that the Black Fire tribe had never had in hundreds of years. This was an unimaginable eruption of the Black Fire tribe after years of decline. Perhaps this was the sign of the Black Fire tribe's rise again? Unlike the Divine Wood tribesmen who were at a loss about their future and had just experienced the extermination of their tribe, every warrior of the Black Fire tribe was extremely excited. As their leader, Huayan undoubtedly understood the importance of this battle. He could even imagine how the entire northern region of the wilderness would be shaken when the news that the Divine Wood tribe had been annihilated by the Black Fire tribe spread within a few days. The impact of this battle was even greater than the battle between the four races and the Mountain Spirit clan. In the darkness of the night, under the illumination of the torches, the troop moved forward. Except for Huyen and the huge black wolf Atsu, no one dared to approach the black-robed priest, whether it was the captives who had surrendered in fear or the warriors of the Black Fire tribe. "You've done well." Because there was no one around, it was easier for the two to talk. Huyen lowered his voice and said to Lu Chen. The hood on Lu Chen's head moved, and he turned his head to look at Huyen. In the light of the fire, his figure seemed like an illusory shadow, and the white bone mask covering his face made him look even more sinister and terrifying. Huyen frowned and said, "I don't like you wearing this mask. It's not something of our tribe." Lu Chen was silent for a moment, and then reached out to take off the white bone mask. When his human face, which was out of place among the people around him, reappeared in front of Huyen, for some reason, Huyen seemed to be relieved. "That's good," he said. "Are you satisfied with the result of this battle?" Lu Chen asked him. Huyen smiled and nodded, saying, "I can't think of a better result." As he said this, his expression became serious, and he looked at the people behind him, saying in a low voice, "It's only these people that I'm still a little worried about." Lu Chen said lightly, "I've already told you the reason why I'm doing this. This is something that can't be helped. Your tribe has been in decline for too long, and your strength is too weak. If you want to compete with the large tribes in the south, you can only take an unconventional approach if you want to see results in a short period of time." Huyen was silent, but there was still a trace of worry on his face. He said, "Are you really confident?" Lu Chen looked at the darkness in front of him, and after a while, he said, "We'll subdue as many as we can. As for those that we can't subdue, or those that refuse to sincerely submit, I'll let you handle them." Huyen nodded, his face cold, and with a trace of murderous intent, he didn't say anything else. As a barbarian and the leader of the tribe, he was used to seeing blood, killing, and death. He naturally wouldn't be soft-hearted. "That's right, how did you summon that shadow demon?" After a while, Huyen asked Lu Chen again, a trace of surprise and faint excitement on his face. "I've heard of this thing when I was young, it's one of the most powerful monsters." Lu Chen hesitated for a while, then said, "It's the Fire God's staff's credit." "Fire God's staff?" Huyen didn't understand, and asked, "What about the Fire God's staff?" Lu Chen said, "After it returned to its original state in the Fire God altar, you might not have felt it, but I could feel that after the Fire God's staff merged into one, its spiritual power greatly increased, and it also has an unimaginable power. When using the Fire God's witchcraft, it seems to have the effect of amplifying the power by 10 times. "What?" Even though Huyen was already used to being surprised these days, at this moment, he still couldn't help but be shocked. Lu Chen seemed to have already expected such a reaction from Huyen. He smiled bitterly and said, "That's right. You also know that it hasn't been long since I came into contact with the Fire God's inheritance. There are many witchcraft that I can't use, but with the help of the Fire God's staff, it's much more convenient. This is also the biggest reason why I dared to boast to you that we can definitely win against the Divine Wood tribe." Huyen let out a long breath, nodded and said, "I see." Then, he revealed a happy expression and said, "If that's the case, as long as you diligently train, your cultivation will increase, and with this God's staff, won't even the shaman." He didn't dare to continue, but the meaning in his words was very clear. However, Lu Chen shook his head and said, "I feel that this matter isn't as good as you think." Huyen was stunned and said, "Why?" Lu Chen said, "I vaguely feel that this kind of powerful effect probably has an upper limit. Once the power of the Black Fire God reaches a certain level, the Fire God's staff will no longer have such a powerful help. Otherwise, how many powerful shamans and priests did your Black Fire tribe produce in the past? With just this Fire God's staff, you would be able to flatten the southern wilderness and unify all the races in the north." Huyen slowly nodded, looking a little disappointed, but he still smiled and said, "You are right. But after so long, there's something I can't figure out." Lu Chen said. What's wrong? Lu Chen looked at him and said, since the fire god's staff is so powerful, why did the ancestors of your black fire tribe split it into two and only brought one half to the north? He smiled and casually said, it can't be that the shamans or priests of your black fire tribe in that era, when countless barbarian armies attacked the north, secretly decided that they would lose this battle, so they secretly left the fire god's staff behind and left a spark for your black fire tribe, right? Huiyan was stunned at first, then laughed and said, how is that possible? Lu Chen also laughed and said, that's right, it's impossible. That's why I can't figure it out. Huiyan shrugged his shoulders and said, then don't think about it. Look in front of us. After walking for a while, we should be able to see our tribe's campsite. Father and the rest should be anxiously waiting for us. Lu Chen slightly narrowed his eyes and said, let's go back and take a look. I don't know what they will think when they see the Divine Wood Tribe people. Huiyan's face stiffened and he didn't say anything. Chapter 320. When Huiyan returned to the Black Fire Tribe's camp with this unprecedented victory, the anxious tribesmen who had been waiting for a long time immediately cheered. The entire Black Fire Tribe seemed to be boiling with excitement. After returning to the camp from the secret cave in the oasis, they were most worried about their loved ones who had left for the war. Even if the barbarians were savage, fierce, and wild, they still had kinship and humanity. For example, among the Divine Wood Tribe's people who had surrendered, there were many barbarian warriors who would rather die than surrender. However, under the premise of the tribe's destruction, and when Lu Chen coldly threatened them with the fate of their families, they finally surrendered. Of course, it was also possible that some of them already had the desire to live in their hearts, but they had no excuse in front of the gods and ancestors. Lu Chen just happened to present this almost perfect excuse in front of them, allowing them to live with some humiliation but peace of mind. As for the truth of the matter, no one knew what everyone was thinking. Only they themselves would know. The news of the Black Fire Tribe's warriors annihilating the Divine Wood Tribe in one fell swoop spread throughout the Black Fire Tribe's camp. Great joy immediately enveloped the entire tribe. However, when people saw the Divine Wood Tribe's captives following behind the Black Fire Tribe's warriors, they were all taken aback. When they heard that under the leadership of the black-robed priest, these Divine Wood Tribe barbarians were about to become a part of the Black Fire Tribe, the entire camp suddenly burst into an uproar. The Divine Wood Tribe, which had been exterminated, was naturally uncomfortable with swallowing so many people from other tribes at once. However, for the Black Fire Tribe, which was the victor, it was an unprecedented event. For many years, the barbarians of the southern wilderness had already become familiar with and accustomed to the original rules. In their minds, worshipping the gods and revering their ancestors was a matter of course. No one would ever think of betraying these rules and joining another tribe. Of course, those who had such thoughts now seemed to have not encountered the desperate situation that the Divine Wood Tribe had encountered. But no matter what, most of the Black Fire Tribe's barbarians couldn't accept this. However, no one in the camp dared to rebuke them. The reason was very simple. Apart from the mysterious and terrifying black-robed priest, the leader of this operation was the extremely prestigious warrior chief, Huiyan. Moreover, many of the Black Fire barbarians quickly discovered that the strongest and most elite warriors who had followed Huiyan on this expedition, the barbarians who could be said to be the foundation of the Black Fire Tribe's military strength, did not seem to have any objections. Not only that, when that strange atmosphere spread, almost all the Black Fire warriors stood behind Huiyan and the black-robed priest, intentionally or unintentionally. That's right, apart from Huiyan, there was also the black-robed priest. Every single Black Fire warrior looked at that black figure with awe that they had never felt before. However, rules that had been ingrained in the hearts of the people for thousands of years could not be easily overturned. Ordinary Black Fire tribesmen were intimidated by these powerful people, but in the Black Fire Tribe, there were people of higher status who were not afraid of them. That person quickly walked out and stood in front of all the Black Fire tribesmen. The wrinkles brought by Nian Hua's old age were engraved on Huahu's face. His back was hunched and he was gasping for breath. Even his steps were slow. Perhaps only his eyes still maintained the firm belief of a barbarian tribe leader. His grandson, Huahu, supported him by his side. Then, he looked at the captives who had been brought to his tribe's camp with a complicated and slightly angry expression. In the end, he turned all his disgust into hatred and glared at the person standing beside his father. Lu Chen, of course, noticed the gaze of the barbarian youth, Huahu. Lu Chen only felt that it was a little funny to see that strange but hateful gaze. He could more or less understand the feelings of this barbarian youth called Huahu, but he was not apologetic at all. A long time ago, when he was just a youth about the same age as Huahu, under the tutelage of that bald and burly deity stage cultivator, he had already cast aside his weak and compassionate heart. Perhaps after many years, his experience had enriched, and his temperament had also changed, but that was only for friends he had met by chance in the human race. As for the southern wilderness, he still did not have the slightest bit of soft-heartedness. Therefore, he turned a blind eye to Huahu's angry gaze, and even took out the white bone mask from his bosom in a slightly provocative manner, and slowly put it on his face. After entering the Black Fire tribe's camp, the former Divine Wood tribesmen, who had betrayed their ancestors and were forced to join the enemy tribe, seemed very frightened. Looking at the strange and hostile gazes around them, the panic and bewilderment that had been suppressed in their hearts seemed to be on the verge of exploding. Who would believe the barbarians who had betrayed the beliefs of their ancestors? If it were him, he would not believe it either. So, what would be waiting for him? The unpredictability and fear of death could drive a person insane. Therefore, the women tightly hugged their crying children with tears in their eyes, while the men clenched their fists and gritted their teeth. The clamorous noise drifted out from the crowd, increasing the vigilance and hostility of the surrounding Black Fire tribe clansmen. The atmosphere in the camp gradually became tense. It was also at this time that Lu Chen put on the white bone mask. Under the sunlight, Lu Chen looked like the shadow of a demon at this moment, contrasting with the gloomy white bone mask, making him look even more terrifying. But for some reason, when the white bone mask appeared on his face, perhaps because they suddenly saw a token passed down by their ancient ancestors, or perhaps because they remembered the promise made by the black-robed priest, the restless Divine Wood tribesmen slowly calmed down. So in the end, everyone's eyes once again fell on the center of the camp. There, Huaying supported his grandfather Huahu, and opposite them stood Huayan and Lu Chen side by side. The three generations of the Black Fire tribe were the symbols and leaders of the Black Fire tribe. With the addition of a black shadow beside them, at this moment, there seemed to be a faint confrontation. The barbarians of the Black Fire tribe looked at this scene with complicated expressions, and Huayan's expression did not look good either. After a moment, he stepped forward and bowed to his father, saying, "Father, I've returned." Huahu nodded his head and looked at him with a complicated expression, then swept his gaze over Lu Chen who was standing beside him. After a moment of silence, he asked, "What's going on?" Huayan had no intention of hiding anything. He raised his head and in front of everyone, he clearly explained the ins and outs of the matter. Finally, he looked at Huahu with bright eyes and said, "Father, from today onwards, these people are the people of our Black Fire tribe." The surrounding Black Fire tribe members were deathly silent. No one spoke, and no one even dared to breathe loudly. Even Huaying, who was standing beside Huahu, had a change in expression. He looked at his father, who was once the most imposing and upright person in his heart, with his mouth half open, as if he did not know what to say. After a while, Huahu suddenly sneered and said, "Nonsense." After these two words were said, it immediately caused a commotion in the surrounding crowd. This was the judgment of the current chief of the Black Fire tribe, and he directly denied what Huayan had just said. His attitude and expression were exceptionally clear, leaving no room for refutation. "This is nonsense, this is nonsense. Hua Hu raised his voice and shouted, if you are not a descendant of our Black Fire tribe, then you have no right to become a barbarian of the Black Fire tribe. What right do you have to act so recklessly and take in so many people of different races at once? Are you not afraid of the wrath of the fire god and the punishment of the ancestors? Following his harsh words, the other people of the Black Fire tribe seemed to be wavering, and their expressions became somewhat hesitant. The Divine Wood tribe members were once again frightened and panicked, and the scene immediately became somewhat chaotic. Whispers could be heard, as if something was about to happen. But at this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side, suppressing all the noise. Right? Who has the right to judge whether the fire god is angry or not, and who has the right to listen to the thoughts of the Black Fire tribe's ancestors? Is it you? In an instant, all the voices in the Black Fire tribe disappeared, and countless gazes fell on the source of the voice. They saw the black-robed priest wearing a white bone mask take a step forward, staring at the old chief, and lightly say, if I remember correctly, the only ones who have the right to judge these matters should be the chief priests of our tribe. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.